I'm a stand-in for the real MC today. But I would like to welcome everyone to the 2014 Healthy Nashville Summit. The work that you're going to do today is extremely important to the city of Nashville and to the health of Nashville and to the future of Nashville. We thank you so much for being here today. We'd like to just do a few housekeeping things, which is that the bathrooms are out here, and as you exit, you can go to the left, and they are there, and please just feel free to use the facilities as needed. And again, thank you all for being here today. It's my pleasure at this time to introduce Dr. Bill Paul, the Director of Health.
Thank you, Angie. I am not as cute as the kid president. I'm sorry. Welcome. Thank you for being here on this beautiful day. Looks like rain out there. It is rain out there. This is Healthy Nashville Summit 2014. There are a lot of, everyone here is important, and it is so great that you're here. We're looking forward to a really productive day, a really important day for Nashville. I was gonna, if I start naming the important people that are here, it'll take all morning. So I will have you all introduce yourselves to each other and move on. Sort of how we got here. This is going to be very quick. 2003, who here was involved with Healthy Nashville map process the first time around? There are a couple, John Harkey, Janie Parmley, Dr. Bailey. Dr. Bailey is here. Actually, okay, I'll introduce, these are dignitaries because they were in on the ground floor. Dr. Bailey as Director of Health, my predecessor. Janie Parmley as Chair of the Board of Health at that time. John Harkey as, you're an inaugural member of Healthy Nashville. And then I should also mention Dr. Batson's here on the Board of Health. Oh, Dr. Wingfield too? So we have this continuity, which is great. 2010, we had Healthy Nashville was focused on issues, and obesity was one of them, and we had something we called a Convergence Conference, or the Healthy Eating Active Living Summit. That was just before Nashville was awarded the Communities Putting Prevention to Work grant, and so when we got that stimulus grant, we went into implementation for 2 years. Great resources to have. We did some good things for Nashville. As that wound down, we took another look at Healthy Nashville and time for a full-on community health assessment. And so that's kind of where we are now with a full MAP assessment. MAP, who participated in the assessment so far this year? Most people here, so that's great. If you haven't, it's okay. This will be a great day anyway. But it's called Mobilizing for Action Through Planning and Partnerships. And one way of thinking about this is think about a visit to the doctor's office, except the doctor is us, and the patient is Nashville. So community health assessment is like our checkup on Nashville. It's a process that systematically collects and analyzes data to understand health within a specific community. And so that's kind of the first part of MAP. We've been through 5 assessments, and we've done a lot of reflecting and looking at both the health of Nashville and the systems that support health in Nashville. And once you've done the assessment, you got your diagnosis, and you need to write a big prescription. And so the Community Health Improvement Plan is really Nashville's prescription for how we're going to be healthier. Long-term, systematic effort to address public health problems on the basis of the results of the community health assessment activities and the community health improvement process. We do use words in public health. This is one of my favorite slides. I'm from Chicago. Chicago had a little problem with cholera. They had 3% of the population dying from cholera. And so as a community, they gathered together and they said, well, what are we going to do? Are we going to tell every individual to boil water? Are we going to start providing clean water one neighborhood at a time? Well, they wrote a very big prescription for Chicago. They dug a new river so that the sewage would not flow into the lake where people were getting their drinking water from, and the sewage actually was redirected downstate. But The point being, this is one of the biggest engineering feats of all time, or at least in the US, or at least in Chicago, and it was a health intervention. So there are times when the health of a community needs a pretty big prescription. And that's, that's somewhat the old days of public health, but we should be challenged here to not always think about little tiny prescriptions for the health of our community. So, Healthy Nashville Leadership Council created a vision statement, and I'm going to read it to you. I still find this inspiring, and it is kind of what we're all aiming for. Healthy Nashville has a culture of well-being where all people have the opportunity and support to thrive and prosper. As the Healthy Nashville Leadership Council and a cast of supporting folks from the health department and across the community went through the MAP process, we identified 3 strategic issues. These are really critical issues that Nashville needs to address if we're going to get to that vision that we wrote down. The wording is a little bit longer. I've shortened them for the slide. One is advancing equity in health. The first one, the top priority of Nashville in terms of advancing our health as a community. Second is to support mental and emotional health. Third is to maximize the built and natural environments to optimize health. So these are big. And they are not things that you're going to say, okay, health department, run off and fix that one. And they're not ones that we're going to say, oh, hospitals, Vanderbilt, you got a lot of resources. Go run off and fix that one. These are ones where it's really going to take more than one organization. It's going to take more than one tiny group of dedicated individuals to really have an impact on these. I've heard recently, and I've not studied up on it, the term wicked problems. These are wicked opportunities for Nashville. They're really critical for us to address, but nobody can really address them alone. So that's the challenge before us. As we went through all this, one of the things was really, how do we get this work done? I'm going to shorten again the wording of the council, but basically, how is Nashville going to collaborate and use data to improve our public health system? That is all of us working together, but also the public's health. And so we decided, the Healthy Nashville Council decided to turn this issue into a strategic lens. And there's a buzzword out there called collective impact, which is just that. How do we all act like we're on the same team in order to push in the same direction and get improvement in the things that really matter to us? How do we dig that big river? So today's a big day because we're turning from, okay, these are the big issues, to, okay, what are we going to do about them? Now, fortunately, people in this room, organizations we represent, others are doing things, and we'll spend some time on that. But I think the 2 real things to focus on today, this morning, we're going to really explore and understand the concept of collective impact. And we'll have our keynote speaker, Monte Roulier, will help with that. But I think also through the day we'll hear about examples in Nashville of collective impact. And then in the afternoon, we're going to work together on identifying strategies. What are the strategies that we need to gather together to have an impact on these strategic issues for Nashville? Now, I should mention at lunch is going to be great. You're not going to want to miss lunch because there's awards. And Rick Bernhardt is going to be speaking about the Nashville Next process. So we're in this big public health planning process at the same time as Nashville is in its big municipal planning process for the general plan or Nashville Next. And we're really thrilled that there is a connection, that as people think about Nashville's future, a lot of it having to do with transportation and the built environment, things like that, people are thinking about health. How can we make this plan as healthy as it needs to be? So this is a slide I have used ever since the very first HEAL Summit, and it's still pretty applicable to what we've planned today. I think when we get together, we want to celebrate what's going well. We want to celebrate success. Certainly getting through the assessment phases of MAP is the first success. There's also a lot of great work and a lot of momentum going on in Nashville. Reinvigorate existing efforts, stimulate new efforts to improve health, strengthen relationships among organizations and coalitions working to make Nashville healthier, and in the end, really get better as a community in turning vision into action. And so, yes, we meet, yes, we have meetings for an entire day, but at the end result, what we want to see is results. We want to see a healthier Nashville. So again, thank you for being here. Picture of Mayor Dean on a walk. Hopefully you're familiar that our mayor has led quite a bit in promoting walking and physical activity, and also doing a lot for a healthier Nashville. But I think I just like the slide, and I wanted to close with that. So have a great day. Thank you for being here. And my next job is to introduce Ted Cornelius, who is the chair of the Healthy Nashville Leadership Council, and he's right here.
Thank you, Dr. Paul, and welcome to today. Today is going to be an exciting day, and I tell you, I've been honored to serve as chair for the Healthy Nashville Leadership Council, but I'm honored to serve with some really incredible folks, and I really want to, if any of you are in the room today, I'd really like for you to stand so we can recognize you. So if you're on the current Healthy Nashville Leadership Council, I would like for you to please stand. I'd like for you to give them a round of applause. They've been working really hard at this, so thank you. Thank you for your service. So just to let you know, the Advisory Council has been very integral in the community health assessment process, and which we refer to as the MAP process. And this Healthy Nashville Leadership Council, they were appointed in March of 2013. And they're a diverse, multisectoral, strategic thinkers, and I'm honored to serve with them because they help me as we continue to keep leading this process as well. But they're very instrumental on the assessment process, and they continue to serve on committees and the Advisory Council, which we have been meeting monthly as far as the Advisory Council. And then outside of that, we've had a lot of time around committee work that has brought us together over some of these priorities. So, but we've done this has been in partnership with the Metro Public Health Department's core support team, and who has used this information for assessment and developed strategic priorities for the city of Nashville, as you're seeing. And so from the strategic issues developed the goals, which will be presented this afternoon. That's some of the discussion that we're hoping that we can gain your input from. And so there's a person that I'd like to introduce, and his name is Monte Roulier, and he's not unfamiliar to this community. He is the co-founder and president of Community Initiatives, which is a network of professionals and partner organizations dedicated to building healthy and whole communities. And the Community Initiatives team actively engages as strategic advisors and technical assistance providers for several leading national efforts aimed at improving community health and preventing chronic disease. In fact, Monte and team were technical advisors when the Communities Putting Prevention to Work grant was here. Monte was very much a part of that, and has been a part of this session as well in the past. Their team also brings a breadth of expertise to these initiatives in areas that include collaborative leadership, coalition development, strategy development, sustainability, and peer learning. And I just want to say Monte's a friend. I've known Monte for the last couple of years. He's a friend of Nashville. He's got a real passion for Nashville and the health of it. So if you wouldn't mind just giving a round of applause for Monte Roulier as he leads our session today.
Thanks, Ted. Good morning, everyone. I like to be called a friend of Nashville. I'm a huge fan of Nashville, and so it's always good to be back here and honored to be a part of your day. After I was invited to speak here, I was trying to think about what would be meaningful that I could share with you, and a story had come to mind about, it's a story about a village in Central Asia, probably somewhere in the Northwest Himalayas. And it's a story that's been passed down for centuries. And it's a story about a group of villagers that hears that there's a really wise person, a wise woman in a village that's relatively close by. And they decide to invite this wise person to come visit them, to impart her wisdom on them. And so they do, and she comes and she shows up at the equivalent of their kind of village square, and she starts with the question, do you know what it is that I'm going to tell you? And they say no. She says, well, you only learn what it is that you already know, so there's really no reason for me to speak. Good day. And she leaves. Perplexed, maybe slightly annoyed, they give it a couple months and decide to invite her again. And she starts with the same question, and she shows up at the village square. Do you know what it is I'm going to tell you? And this time they think they have it figured out, and they say yes. She's like, wonderful. Well, there's really no reason for me to speak then, and she leaves. This time, less than perplexed, definitely fully annoyed. They decide to give it one more chance. A couple months later, again, she shows up, same space, starts with the question, do you know what it is I'm going to tell you? And one side of the square says yes, a chorus of yes. The other side of the square, no. And she says, terrific. This side, tell this side. And she leaves, never to return. And that night, an elderly woman in the village had a dream that she felt helped explain what the kind of behavior of this outside wise woman was, and came to the village square and says, I think I figured out exactly what she was trying to tell us, and that is this, that the real wisdom is in our collective. It's in our tradition. It's in our experiences. We have absolutely everything we need right here. And I firmly believe in the moral of this tale. I believe that the promise of our country and of our communities and our states is really tapping into the collective wisdom of our communities. And that's not to say that we can't learn from other communities, for sure. But that's really where we have the greatest promise. And I think that everything I've learned from Nashville over the last 5 to 8 years that I've been following and have had a chance to visit and work a little bit with different efforts here is that you have extraordinary experiences and assets here around how you work together. And clearly it's not perfect. No community is perfect. But you have, I think, are uniquely endowed, I think, to be collaborative in a lot of ways. You're the TV darlings now, but besides that, you're also the envy of a lot of communities for what you've been doing around your collaborative work for some time. And so it kind of brings me to a little bit of a caveat, which is I don't think there's a lot of things that I could tell you, knowing a lot of the folks in this room, that at some level you don't already know. But that may be okay, because I don't think that's my job, is to come with some new great idea or a new great theory, but to remind us in some ways of what it is that we already do know about what it takes to create healthier and more equitable and more prosperous communities. So that's what I'd like to focus on a little bit, is to explore with you, what do we know about growing healthy, sustainable, more equitable communities? And this new buzzword that Dr. Paul alluded to, how does collective impact, or some of the insights around this approach that many folks have been talking about, and I know that many of you are using now, how does that inform how we get to healthier, more equitable, and sustainable communities? So I'm going to start with one of the most basic questions, and I know that there's epidemiologists. I'm looking at Dr. Paulson to make sure that I get this right, but I think I can get this right because it's the fundamental question of what really creates health. And we know from all types of studies that about 10%, right, has to do with traditional medical care, right, the provision of medical services through hospitals and primary care docs and nurse practitioners. That factor accounts for about 10% of our health. And then depending on the study, somewhere between 20 up to 25% are our genetics, the kind of genetic hand that we were dealt at birth. Right, our propensity to be sick or not, to maybe contract certain diseases. There's something that there with the genetic hand that we were dealt at birth. And then there's this big chunk, about 70%, that has to do with behaviors and environment. And this is what I'd like to double click on with you, because again, people have different words to describe it, but essentially it's made up of a handful of things. One is our individual behaviors, whether I wear my seatbelt, whether what I eat or drink, what types of behaviors I engage in, has a lot to do with our health. So individual choices, right? You with me? The second thing that we know is social relations. That the quality of my relationship with my family members, with people in my community, with my neighbors, has a lot to do with my overall health. And I know you all are going to be focusing on health and well-being, and we continue to get research that really tells us that how being either homeless or being excluded, or when you're younger being bullied, or not having meaningful relationships when you're a senior, the toll that that takes on our mental, physical, and social health. So our social relationships are a big piece of our overall health picture. And then, actually, two more. The other is our built-in natural environment, which is one of your focus areas, the quality of our air, water, and our soil, right? And maybe how our streets are designed, and our communities are either designed for disease or health. So the quality of our built-in, our natural environment. And then fourth, our socioeconomic status. So we don't need any more research to tell us that, you know, to be sick or die early in life is to be poor anywhere in the world. Right, so we know these things. It's been studied for a long time. Epidemiologists can do it. They may have slightly different language for it. We also know that as a nation where we spend most of our money, we spend it on medical services. Again, this is from a national perspective. And about 4% of that goes to that prevention side of our approximately 2.9 million, depending on how you're cutting our federal expenditures. And so there's a disconnect that I'd like to point out a little bit before we jump into kind of what creates healthy, sustainable, and equitable communities. One is that where we're spending much of our money is not really on those purple areas. And the other kind of ironic thing that's happened over the last couple decades is that much of what our traditional medical services, what we're paying for, actually come from those purple areas. Some would say 75% are lifestyle-induced chronic disease. So I think we're grappling with a disconnect right now. No matter where you are on the political spectrum, that's what a lot of the debate's been about and why a lot of reorganizations of healthcare has been about. But much of our attention has really been either how we finance healthcare and how we organize healthcare. At the same time, really where the biggest leverage point is back in that 70%. But the thing that I mostly want to share with you and pivot off of is that all of our research and all of our experience tells us that there's one thing that can actually influence that area in the purple. It's people working in groups. People working in groups is the only way that we're going to change norms around people's individual behavior, that we develop the collective will to change our built-in natural environments where we can actually create caring and compassionate communities. I forget, was it Dina who I just met? At the level of community that we can care for each other, and at the level of community that we can figure out how we deal with the most underserved in our communities. It's people working in groups. And so that's the focus that I'd like to kind of be exploring with you. How is it that we work in groups to actually create healthier, more sustainable, more equitable communities? And it's not just working in groups in any old way, because I think there's also plenty of experience and evidence, and we all have it, where working in groups is no guarantee of success, right? So what is it about how we work in groups that actually tips us into be really effective, to actually achieving greater impact together? So as Dr. Paul said earlier on, there's this term, collective impact, that has grown in popularity. How many of you are familiar or have read one of the articles about collective impact? And how many of you actually are using some sort of collective impact frame for some work that you're doing right now? So many of you, and so as many of you know, since I think it was 2011 winter edition of the Stanford Social Innovation Review, Mark Kramer and John Kenya popularized this term by looking at how do people work in groups to achieve greater impact. And they came up with some insights, and again, at the surface level, they don't seem like earth-shaking, you know, all working towards the same goal and measuring the same things. How do we have people working in groups doing those things? How do we start to have more cross-sector alignment? So again, a lot of the work that you all have been doing for some time is how do we collaborate across sectors, but how do we do it in a way that organizations are actively coordinating and learning from each other? And anymore, and I think one of the things that captured people's attention, and part of it was timing, was that we recognize that we haven't been working well in groups. We're definitely far from being able to hit on all cylinders. And a lot of that is because unintentionally, and sometimes because of ways things are funded, and sometimes because of turf and human nature, a lot of our efforts seem to be isolated when we're dealing with teen pregnancy or other kind of vexing health issues, we have a lot of different groups using slightly different frames and slightly different measures and slightly different programs, hoping that they'll do it all on their own, or that they'll do it so well that others will replicate what they're doing. And there's been a funding model and premise behind this as well. And collective impact is saying that's not going to get us there. I also want to just acknowledge that when I talk about collective impact and we're working with several communities in a couple states using collective impact frame, all of them a little bit different, is that anytime there's a new language that's put out there, a new framework, there's people that kind of jump to it with religious fervor. This is the new way. This is the very best. This is going to change everything. Now then there's, on this other end of the continuum, I'll be slightly exaggerated, there's nothing new here. This is just the same old, and it's a new way of making money. So somewhere in between those extremes is the truth, and that's what I believe, and you'll see as I share with you. I think that collective impact has some really important insights. But a lot of the stuff is not new, but I think that we want to pay attention and kind of glean the value from what that is, and I think that you all are wise to really pay attention to what could work with collective impact, and also recognize that you all have been doing collective impact for a long time in some ways, and just not called it that. You with me? So for those of you who are zealots, who think that this is the only way, this language, strict discipline, I beg your forgiveness in the beginning. I'm joking, because I don't think any of us probably are in that camp. I think we want to figure out what is it that we can take from this that really is going to practically accelerate our efforts. So I'm going to put out a handful of patterns. And the first, this notion in collective impact of a common agenda, and I want to bring it into the context of those that are trying to create healthier communities in the broadest context. So it's really about weaving our mutual interests together. So as we create a common agenda, it's figuring out how to weave the mutual interests. And I think we know lots of evidence, lots of research and experiences that having a common vision gives us enormous energy. It poses the possibility for alignment in many ways. So it builds energy and alignment in ways that trying to solve a single problem doesn't generate that same type of energy. At the same time, this is a picture, by the way, of Denver, Colorado, where I spend part of my time, or right outside. And they're doing a lot of work, just like here in Nashville and other parts of Tennessee, around kind of food access and urban gardening and food hubs. You all, how many of you are part of a lot of food access work here in Nashville? Some really incredible things, I believe, that are going on here. Well, there's some cool stuff going on in Denver as well. And the groups that started a lot of this work, they had some shared values. Some of them talked about food justice. Some of them talked about food access from a public health point of view. But they not only started to kind of weave together some mutual interests, but they also had a shared understanding of the problem, which I think is another insight from collective impact. And none of them believe that people don't eat in these 5 neighborhoods that surround this area because they don't, healthy food because they don't want to. They understand that there are certain cultural barriers, there's certain financial and other physical barriers that are keeping them from eating in healthy ways, and they need to really tap into that local wisdom. So they have a shared understanding of where it is that they want to go and a shared understanding of the problem. And there's a lot of times in our work where we have a kind of vague notion, we use language that's not always specific enough, but we don't really have a same shared understanding of what the problem is, and that way we never really build alignment and real energy together. The other insight with collective impact is, even if we have something really broad, we need to take it down to something really tangible. And I'm going to, some of you know, I've learned and worked with a group in Greenville, South Carolina, and I like to use them as an example sometimes. They don't have tons of resources, although they've certainly gotten some CDC funding, but they have a broad vision of what a healthier Greenville County looks like. But they've taken that vision down to very specifically the settings where people spend most of their times, at schools, at the workplace, around town. So in schools, they have a vision for what a healthy school, whether you're in the rural part or in the urban part of Greenville, South Carolina, and they have a shared agenda of a handful of things that they're trying to do together with a shared understanding of the problem. The same with at workplaces, as they're trying to transform small, medium-sized businesses to be easier and healthier places for employees to be. And again, I know you all have some incredible work that you've been doing in your workplaces. They have a group that's working around town and is around creating a more equitable transportation system that connects people to public transit, and they have a handful of advocacy things that they're kind of pushing. They don't have a Tokes Tokes on their team that actually has that expertise, but they do have a number of folks that actually are saying, here's a handful of things that we could do well to actually create a better transportation system. Same with after school. They have a group called At the Doctor. So they have a broader vision of what is our relationship between individuals and our healthcare providers. And they're doing some pretty cool stuff. They do a lot of motivational interviewing, and they're trying to train all their nurse practitioners and doctors how to do motivational interviewing, helping people really to figure out where their incentives are to be healthier, and then point them to assets around the county, and trying to do that in a really systematic way, and so on. So mealtime, and then they have some stuff around play deserts and recreation deserts. But the thing that strikes me about Greenville, and something that Eleanor Dunlap, who serves as their kind of point staff person, says, is that when you're in Greenville and you're talking about stuff with the Chamber of Commerce or a realtor or a neighborhood activist, we all are talking about slightly different things. We actually are leading with what it means to be in a healthy school and why that's important, or why certain land use practices are important for economic development, but we actually know we're talking about the same vision. We've weaved our mutual interests together in a way that we absolutely know that we're talking about co-benefits with the same solutions. So I think in the work that we do, we can be pretty broad as long as we are really intentional about figuring out how those solutions, you hear the term co-benefit used sometimes, and I think public health uses that a fair amount. What are the co-benefits in our work? And that's part of how we start to get at a really powerful shared agenda. So the next thing is, again, how do we work together? Collective impact calls this, as many of you know clearly, mutually reinforcing activities. So it's basically helping each partner figure out their unique and best role, their unique contribution, so that we're complementing and not duplicating so much. Or that at least if we are doing the same things, we're learning and maybe applying it in slightly different areas. As it relates to kind of the work that we're doing, and I think creating healthier communities, one of the great insights and shifts that Nashville, along with a lot of other communities around the country, have made is recognizing that we can't just tell people to be healthier and expect they're going to be healthier, right? We need to actually change the environments. What are the mantras that we keep hearing? How do we make the healthy choice the easy choice, the default choice? And so we know that somewhere in our mix of strategies, we have to have environmental changes like you've been putting in place here for quite some time. You know, street design and bike racks and showers in workplaces and food access and locations within stores and corner stores. All those things make the easier choice. It becomes part of our cultural norm. So I think that the insight around collective impact is it allows us to really think about what is essential. Again, sometimes people get so intrigued by policy and environmental change, policy system environmental change, that we basically send the signal that programs aren't important. So I think with collective impact, there's an opportunity to figure out what's the unique role of both of those, because programs can be very powerful on-ramps and wraps-arounds to other policy and environmental changes that you all have been making and continue to make. Part of it is, so I used to live in Columbia, Missouri. Actually, I was thinking of Tokes coming. We had Tokes Omashakan come in and give a keynote speech to our community not that long ago. But Columbia, Missouri received a $20-some million federal alternative transportation grant. We're one of the 4 pilots programs. And you would think that everybody in the community would be really excited about that, right? But there were some detractors and even some people that were supposed to be running that weren't terribly enthusiastic about this alternative transportation grant that was trying to get more balanced transportation system, more people biking and walking and using public transport. But we gave it a go, and it was interesting, again, this notion that we build it and people will come. People aren't going to, just because there's nice new curb cuts and new bike lanes, they're not going to automatically start biking to work, right? I think we're recognizing that here in Nashville, just like everywhere else. We need to wrap a lot of other things around it, the B-cycles, all these other things. Well, the same is true in Columbia, Missouri. We needed to figure out how do we start to build the capacity of all different types of people that maybe haven't been on bikes for 20 years to figure out how they're going to get to their neighborhood downtown, how to do it in a way that they can deal with their Midwestern sweaty, stinky clothes. How do we do all these things? How employers can actually embrace this and incentivize it. So all these capacity building and training training programs became super important. Same with schools and trying to get kids safely to school. We needed not only to have some policies in place, but we needed the schools to start to embrace this. We needed to have the crossing guards. We needed, in the case of Columbia, Missouri, at one point had the largest per capita walking school bus program in the country. So, and these are some pictures of the walking school bus, you know, helping families and using service learning to get folks there. So it was the mutually reinforcing activities of changes in the built environment, lots of changes in the built environment with bike lanes and striping, all that, but all these really essential programs. And to start to promote it in a way that actually started to build a culture of change. Like a lot of places, when grants run out, the Department of Public Works, who, with all due respect, and they would admit that, I think, if they're on stage, not all of them are really enthusiastic about this. But over the course of the last few years, they've changed how they think about this. In fact, they did a whole circuit around looking how they can advance their public transport. They're looking at it differently, they're using different measures, and they see this as a prime part of their job. And now the school is actually, instead of saying, is this another little program that we might have liability issues with, have embraced this and are actually really taking on the walking school bus program because the funding's not there. So they started to kind of grab this and institutionalize this. And so I think that there's huge opportunities when we start to think in these terms. We're trying to figure out how to get better impact together, yeah? And so here's a simple formula. Some of you may have seen something like that. If we're trying to reach as many people, if we're trying to create more equitable communities, we need to reach more folks with more frequent exposure, whatever we're trying, healthy exposures, in a comprehensive way. Lowell Solomon, we do a lot of work with Kaiser Permanente, and Lowell Solomon said, you know, we've been investing in Louisville, there's a group in Colorado, they've probably invested $20 million, and they're doing some really cool things. I said, but a lot of our things aren't adding up. We have some really cool school gardens here, we have a really cool program here, we have a cool environmental change here, but it actually doesn't always add up to kind of tipping people's behavior, to really making the healthy choice easy choice. And so here's a slide I borrow from Lowell. You've seen probably variations of that. How do we start to move towards, in the case of schools, maybe a simple policy of 50% healthy vending slot, to maybe a ban on unhealthy foods in the cafeteria, if that's right for your community, to whole school reform, where we're looking at a whole host of how we're sourcing and procurement policies, which I know your school system's really looking at. And in a way, let's see. All school reform was starting to look at what are those environments around our neighborhood schools or wherever kids are going to school so that there are healthy food options on their way to school, right? So this is moving from just kind of piecemealing strategy of figuring out how do we mutually reinforce what we're doing in a way that actually adds up to change. Pretty simple concept, and I think you all have been doing some of that. Walk to school day, to let's get everybody walking to school every day in the year, to safe routes to schools in a really robust way, to safe routes in schools plus our complete streets policies. How do we keep building mutually reinforcing programs and policy changes so that it actually adds up to make a difference in somebody's life, whatever neighborhood that they're in? Make sense? So this is just a principle applied to kind of collective impact on that front. So there's a ton of, obviously, energy around measurement, right? We've forever, let's make data-driven decisions. We hear this? It has to be evidence-based, data-driven decisions. And I think for good reason. We need to use data, and I think collective impact has some good insights around that. I believe in doing place-based work. It really means that we need to make wise use of data and technology. You know, 15, 20 years ago, we've been a part of a lot of big, huge community health needs assessments where we spent tons and tons of months of collecting data, hoping that that data collection process would pop out priorities for us. You ever been a part of a process like that? That somehow it would be so clear what we needed to work after we collected all this data. And I think that we're realizing that we can't afford, we still need to look at lots of data to expect that data is going to tell us exactly where to act. Instead, we need to use data really strategically with the wisdom of community to figure out where are priorities, what's political well, what would sell right now. I think the other thing is with collective impact is saying we can't be working on the same programs and have slightly different measures because it means we're not really thinking about it in the same terms. So how do we start looking at shared measurement systems so that we're not expending the same amount of resources collecting data in several different ways where we could kind of share those resources, but more importantly, how do we share indicators of success and outcomes that actually help us figure out how things are adding up collectively together, right? So I believe a lot of our work is really trying to figure out how to get more granular. So collective impact, this is still a place where people, I think, are struggling most. If we're doing place-based change, it's really great that you have county-level data in Davidson County. It's useful. But if we're trying to figure out where our biggest opportunities for health and well-being, county-level data isn't going to cut it, is it? If we want to know where are the big opportunities to improve our transportation systems, our food access, where there are play deserts or recreation deserts, we need actually really granular data, and we actually need data in more real time. So again, I think you all are doing some of this. Back to the example in Columbia, Missouri, the only way that we could actually see if people were actually shifting their mode was to have, we use a lot of graduate students from the University of Missouri that sat out there in a pretty rigorous way to start to see how did we start to shift people moving downtown. And how do we start to shift at our 18 elementary schools in one region of the city, how many people were moving from driving their kids to school to walking kids to school? And how did some of the environmental policy change do that? So I think more and more collective impact is requiring that we get really strategic about data collection that tells us in settings whether we're making a difference or not, and not counting on really dated data that's at a too high of a level. Make sense? So how do we leverage more granular data? So some of you know that my team's a part of the Community Commons, which is a public access for free 25 to 27,000 free data layers that you all can access at any point. The way we build it is we build things for Kaiser, RWJ, Kellogg, CDC, and we give much of it away for free. So this is actually an older map from this, and this is a map of Louisville, Kentucky, and it basically shows, as you can see, a version of a food desert that you can kind of get to within a couple clicks. They actually have uploaded some other data and have some other ways that they're doing it. But the point is, the really cool thing about data visualization, how we're collecting data in a more granular way, is now we're able to bring this into the community to start having them tell the stories around where are the big opportunities. I couldn't tell you why there are food access challenges in those areas. Only people that live there can start to tell the full picture of the story. So the mind shift, I think, with data collection is not to just have this be the purview of the experts. We've got a lot, we need some of that, but we also just need to bring people in to tell us a story around what's happening and why. And data visualization allows us to do this. By the way, I know that you all are working on health equity. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to be launching for the CDC the next FOA. So through the Community Commons, you'll be able to go to a website and you'll be able to look at vulnerable populations. And so we have a number of different ways that you can look at vulnerable populations by poverty rates and by high school education rates, and you can use sliders, and that's going to drive funding for that FOA for CDC. And I think that will be true of a lot of other outside sources of funding. If we're going to get funding, we need to show results. But most importantly, I think we want results regardless of funding it, right? So how do we use data more strategically? One of the things that I think is really fascinating, actually having our team working with all of those groups, is separately the Centers for Disease Control, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, Kellogg, and Kaiser all asked our team, not me because I'm terrible with math and and I certainly can't program anything, but if we could combine all of the data visualization and relational databases that we're building for them with storytelling. And it's because we're recognizing that if we're going to be successful in creating change at a local level or at a state level, we need to get really good at telling stories. And that's one of the best ways of making meaning of data. So as you can see this quote, "We remain devoted to data, enamored of empirical evidence, and while we will always need hard facts to make our case, we often fail to realize that the battle for hearts and minds starts with the hearts." We need to be able to tell stories with our data, and stories that are accurate and stories that move us to change. I think I've shared with a couple of you before, working with Health Action Partnership, which is also a CPBW grantee in Birmingham, Alabama. They've been doing a lot of the same work that you all have been doing in Nashville, and I think there's some interesting kind of reciprocal relationships and learning between your communities that have gone on. And in Birmingham, they had been collecting some data. They were doing some work on trying to go smoke-free in an area where there is a lot of tobacco use. And they took a poll, a pretty rigorous poll, and about 70% of the folks in Jefferson County were supportive of smoke-free ordinances and tobacco-free ordinances, which surprised some of them. And they'd been doing a lot of studies, really mapping their food deserts and looking at some changes in their built environment. And they decided to have a gathering that I had the chance to just pretty much listen in on. And this young woman got up and spoke. They had some city council folks. They had a lot of their key leaders. They had a lot of their grassroots leaders that were there. And she told a story about her father. And she told the story about how her father, who many in that room knew because he was a pretty well-known musician in a band there, died of secondhand lung cancer. And she told her story, which was a really powerful story, and it wasn't done in a manipulative way. It was in a real way to kind of help people understand how this was affecting people's lives in restaurants and bars. And then they had Bobby Humphreys, who was one of my childhood heroes because I grew up in Colorado. He played for the Denver Broncos, but he also grew up in Birmingham, that told the stories of how the food deserts in some places had actually grown and what it was like to go to bed hungry, and how he had a hard time living with himself knowing that that was still the case in Birmingham and that he knew that we could do better, right? And then they had a group of pretty powerful handful of bar owners and restaurateurs that said, we're not going to listen to any more data. All these lies, we're not going to go under if we go smoke-free. We're going tonight, and whoever wants to join us will join us. So these stories, plus their data, actually served as a tipping point for a lot of the key initiatives. Of course, there was a lot of things that built up over time, but the power of story and data, we need to get really good at that if we're going to actually create the changes that I think all of us desire. Yeah? So this last piece that is talked a lot about with collective impact is backbone, grow a backbone. And again, I think the insight here is that a lot of our collaborative efforts, we spend a lot of money, a lot of energy kind of getting them going, and then a grant will run out, the funding source will run out, and all that gets wasted, right? And that if we're going to do this collaborative work, having people work effectively in groups, we actually need a lot of this core capacity that on the outside may not seem like a lot, but a lot of you do this collaborative work knows it takes enormous amount of resource. I'm thinking of David Campbell there. Just all the work that you and your team had done with community pollution prevention work to convene, to do project management well, to support and coordinate evaluation and research. These are all core capacities of actually doing deep kind of collective impact work or collective work generally. So how do we build that backbone support? And it takes a lot of different forms. The collective impact, when it first came out, said it needs a separate staff, single organization, separate staff. And then it really didn't say that in this, those are prescriptive terms. And I think we're realizing that there's a lot of different ways that a backbone organization or backbone support could take place. It doesn't have to be a single organization, although that does work. But there's another piece around that the backbone generally kind of supports, which is continuous communication. There's no way we can get this work done if we don't have loads and loads of trust. So how do we have frequent communication with people at all levels in a way that engenders trust and transparency, which is one of the big challenges with a lot of our, I think, our collaborative efforts. So no matter how you do a backbone organization, whether it's a group like in Louisville, Greenville, it was the YMCA that served as the physical agent and provided some of that. In some cases, it's maybe a health department or a community foundation, but it has to be a group that has the credibility for the vast majority of the population to know that they are acting for the common good. And I think that's really super important. We're doing work with a really big city on the West Coast right now, and they want to join Collective Impact, and they have people that love Collective Impact and some of them that hate the terminology, so we've had to kind of reconcile that. But they have a really big university that has enormous potential for evaluation and research. So they're providing a lot of the research evaluation for their backbone. Then they have the health department that's providing subject matter expertise and helping with convening. And then they have a network of their community hospitals that are doing community benefit that are actually serving as part of the backbone as well. So in this case, they have 3 different organizations that are kind of serving as a backbone. And I just put out that there's a lot of different ways that this could happen. So 5 elements of collective impact. I want to make sure I do a little bit of my job here to make sure that there's a little bit of a level set. Just, again, a common agenda. So shared agenda and shared vision. Collecting data in some common ways, and ideally with a shared measurement system so that there's shared accountability. Mutually reinforcing activities, figuring out what one another's organizational strengths are and how we add those up together so that they make a real difference. And then continuous communication. which is really building communication structures formally and informally in a way that builds trust. I was working with and learning from a group in Tucson, Arizona, and they have a group that's been meeting for 10 years, and they've moved to Collective Impact. And one of the things that they've done is they said, we're all so busy. We get busier and busier each week, but they have committed to taking time to learn together wherever they're serving. If they're working on early childhood, they have their meetings, they go and they learn and connect with those folks. They go to conferences together, they watch movies together, and they are a learning community. And that has built enormous trust and resiliency as they've kind of taken some hits over the years. And then, of course, this backbone organization, separate organization with some staff, with the resources, that's in it for the long haul. I should really add that. So this is the idea, well, yeah, CDC loses money or some other local grant or political alliances change, that there's an organization or series of organizations that can kind of provide that collaborative infrastructure for the long haul. Does that make sense? This is a collective impact that you've been knowing and thinking about? So a couple quick examples. Some of you have heard of Shape Up Somerville. So one of the leading kind of childhood obesity change efforts in the country. So again, around increased physical activity, increased eating, and then improving infrastructure and policy. And it started actually as more of a community-based participative research project with some folks out of Tufts University. And the structure, they have a steering committee. They didn't initially call it a steering committee. And the backbone is primarily based in the city department. Mayor Catatoni is the person that's been spearheading a lot of that, but they've institutionalized a lot of that support through a planner, a coordinator, and a director. And that backbone organization really supports each of these different groups so that when they show up, they are able to kind of put their best foot forward. And so their mutually reinforcing activities are really around all the things that they do before school. So all those different groups that either had programs or working for policies to get more schools to offer free or reduced breakfasts or whatever that might be a policy change in their school system are now using similar measures and trying to figure out how all their pieces kind of add up to make a difference, right? So they've kind of broke it down if you're looking at the course of a day. And I've heard, by the way, that there's Align Nashville, is that right? That is doing some similar work that I don't know about, but I can't wait to hear about. That's also looking at your school systems that maybe a little bit broader frame around healthy youth and how to do that in partnership with Metro Nashville Public Schools. Is that? So again, maybe it's somewhat similar in some ways, but during the school day, so again, all the program providers, all the policy stuff, how do we bring kitchens back in and help food service workers? So they have all these different differentiated activities going on in all their schools. After school programs, how do we do joint use agreements? How do we learn from you? If you're doing a joint use agreement and you have the Y participating here and United Way program, how do we do that in a way that really maximizes kids' activity and safety? And then how do we start to really reach out to, in meaningful ways and culturally appropriate ways, to build the capacity of parents and families and grandparents that are taking care of their kids? And then how do we do it in a larger community environment? So the thing that I just like to highlight here is that there are almost no new programs here. What they did is they took things that were already mostly happening in their community and they started to scale and fill gaps. And that's what collective impact is in many ways about. It's about trying to figure out how we do better with what it is that we have. So one more quick one, and then I'm going to pivot. Live Well Omaha, they've been at this work for 20 years, since late 80s actually. And they actually were a Healthy Omaha partnership or something. But they've evolved over time. They've had a lot of the same experiences. I think they're one of the most interesting collective efforts in the country, and they've made an enormous difference. And what they've evolved to over the last few years is saying, here's how our collective impact works. They have a group called Live Well Omaha that started in partnership with Douglas County. It's a separate now 501c3, which I think you should consider with caution if you ever go that route. It's not necessary. But they are the purveyor of data, and they have for over 10 years created really compelling scorecards and report cards, and they bring all the different community stakeholders together to start looking at where they're trending on shared goals. And so the first couple years they were kind of clunky and the data wasn't that good. It's getting better and better, and so now they are the purveyor of data in terms of where are we as a community and where are we improving and where are our weaknesses, but they're also the purveyor of data so that not everybody has to keep collecting data. All the little not-for-profit groups and others that are working there, they provide resources and support for them so that they have meaningful data and rigorous ways of kind of evaluating their impact that's appropriate. they're the catalyst and convener around issues. So they've built up enough credibility, enough trust, where pressing issues that just kind of sprung up out of nowhere needs a forum to really figure out where the community would take them, kind of collecting into the collective wisdom of the community could go. Or one of the, I don't know if that's I'll go back to this. There's a guy, one of the events I was at, Neil Pierce, who's a pretty famous writer for the Washington Post on transportation. They would bring Neil Pierce in, and they would have him think about their transportation district, and they'd have all their business leaders, all their transportation experts, civic activists, and then they would start to measure, after his speech, what would be the return on investment to our business, to our environment, and to our health and well-being based on Neil Pierce and some other presentations and some of our measures. So they have some really compelling ways of kind of being conveners that spark action. They also decided that they are pretty good at being incubators, piloting ideas, either indirectly or directly. Of course, they got CPPW and Community Transformation Grant and Healthy Kids, Healthy Communities, but they realized that there's a lot of pockets of innovations at neighborhood levels, and that they could provide the resources to pilot some of those initiatives or support others that are piloting innovation, not just having to work on big, huge evidence-based strategies from big funders. And then they are health investment advisors. So it used to be, by the way, that person down below, you may recognize, that's Warren Buffett. So they have a bunch of data centers, and they have some of their heavy hitters in their business industries, Wellcoa, ConAgra, a lot of different groups. And they have built enough of a relationship where they've been talking about taking on sugar-sweetened beverage, and a number of the business leaders don't want to work on that. And they have enough of a relationship where they say, we respect the health department to go after that anyway. And most of the time, we're going to work on the same things, but there's a handful of things that we disagree, but we still know that our bigger vision's there, and we're going to stay at the table. So they have enormous increasing resources where they are really investment advisors, again, at those looking at return on investment to business, to local economies, into the environment, and people's health. And then last, again, with the spirit of the Backbone organization, saying this work will never sustain itself if we don't actually invest in it. So they actually have a way of kind of making sure that these efforts continue to go on based on local investments. So that's Live Well. And I guess the thing here is that they think of this as a movement. If you're with folks in Live Well, Colorado, we've been at this for 20 years. A lot of the things that we're working on, just as Dr. Paul alluded to earlier on, are going to continue to be places. Hopefully we're making progress. But we need to keep working on it, and it's a movement. And movements require a couple things. They require shared language, and I think collective impact can provide that for a lot of groups. Shared values, a common agenda of what it is that we're really going to work on, to kind of what are our leverage places, and shared measures. And so I think in our country right now, and certainly in Nashville, which is a leader in I think a lot of the healthy eating, active living, and particularly pairing that with green environmental goals, a lot of people look to you as leaders in this country for that. It's because we know there's co-benefits. And how do we start to align our policies and programs, because we know that they're interrelated. You know, health is interrelated with the environment. There's all types of interesting partnerships that are starting to form around these different pieces. So I'm going to pull back outside of the United States for a minute and thinking about movements for a moment. And this is Muhammad Yunus, who actually some of you know, the founder of the Grameen Bank. If you're familiar with this, does microcredit. Actually studied here at Vanderbilt probably 35, 40 years ago. And so Muhammad Yunus knows something about movements. He's been a catalytic person with movements. And he went back to his home country of Bangladesh back in 1973. And he started to ask questions. He did something wise. He started to tap into the community wisdom and was trying to figure out some of the things that he was teaching about developmental economics, trying to help people in poverty actually add it up. But he learned a lot from these, a group of women who were making baskets. And they were doing it, and they were, he thought, beautiful baskets, and was asking about their experience. And they said, we don't make anything off these baskets because basically we have to go through a loan shark. So we get our resources, we take loans, and we give it back, and we don't make any profit. And we just kind of have our time paid for it. And so he made a loan to them for $27. And that $27 loan allowed them to take the risk of bypassing those loan sharks and actually building their own baskets and getting a fair value for that. And he discovered his mission in life, which was to provide credit to the poor, to the poorest of the poor. And there were a lot of people that thought he was crazy at the time. You took out this PhD, and what are you doing messing around with some of this stuff? And he had opposition from the political left and from the religious right. And he continued to experiment, to continue to connect with these women to try to figure out what it would look like. Fast forward from 1976. You know, the funny thing that I say about Muhammad Yunus is that he said, we're asking the wrong questions. And one of the quotes I like, Muhammad Yunus said, we're asking, you know, are people creditworthy? And I want to start asking all of us institutions, banks, and those that are serving, are we worthy to serve people? And he said, all these are important questions. And Muhammad Yunus was talking about things that people thought were literally crazy, to give credit to the poorest people in the world and think that that was going to take off. So again, 30 years later, he wins the Nobel Peace Prize, and his influence, and many would say, has helped raise nearly 500 million people out of poverty on every continent in this country that has started to replicate this model. And it took a lot of courage and a lot of the women, and I had a very small role to play in a microcredit enterprise effort in Tajikistan, which is on the border of Afghanistan, and this is back in the mid-90s. So these women here they're Tajik. One of them is Uzbek, actually, and some of those garments that you see are things that they've been making with their banking money. And so that they made these small businesses, and they all were refugees. All these women had watched their husbands assassinated, and they moved to Dushanbe as refugees, and they're still succeeding, and they still continue to produce, those groups return their loans at a 90% rate, the highest rate of anybody in the world. If you give a banker and say you'll get 90% return on your investment, they take it every time. And so these are these small scale loans, and the interesting thing is that it's a model of collective action. So the only way that these women, in most cases, some of them involve men, get their next loan is that they help each other succeed. They help each other's businesses. They get together and say, oh, I would create this on that dress. I would try to move this food product here. And so they help each other. They have a stake in one another's success. And that's how microcredit actually works. And it's a movement because they figured out they have a shared agenda, both within the little micro banks, but also as a micro enterprise institution. They have shared language, they have shared metrics, they have some shared risk taking, and these simple little rules, and they actually have a backbone organization, even though it wasn't called that. And so they've grown an extraordinary movement based on some simple rules around how they help people work together in groups. And again, I would just say this, collective impact is amazing. I think it has some really great insights. Many of the things that I just shared with you were working before the term collective impact ever came out. So remember that. I think we're always innovating, and we're always adding new language to that. So I think that's really what, and I look at the piece that Dr. Paul put up there around your mission. I can't recite it yet, but what struck me is that talking about how do we create a culture of wellness where people are thriving and flourishing, where people are living up to their greatest potential. That's the same, we're part of the same movement as this, that we change the conditions under which people are actually thriving. And part of the reason why microcredit and other things work is because it's tapping into something that's true. Things that get sustained tap into something true. There's something that is wanting to happen, I think, in this community around really creating the conditions where everybody's thriving, which clearly that's not happening right now. So this is the dignity. There's only CDCs and RWJs and metrics and all those things make a difference, but they don't make a difference unless there's compassion, unless actually we can actually bring the caring. That only happens in the context of community and people that love each other. So I think that's one of the unique gifts that you all have. And again, since I have a moment, I was thinking that maybe you all could just take 3 or 4 minutes wherever somebody is near you in twos. And how do these patterns and practices fit with your experiences? I certainly don't have a monopoly on this. Many of you, as you indicated, have experience with collective impact and other things, whether you have that experience or not. How do they fit with your experiences? You know, maybe there's some that you really affirm, maybe there's some that are missing. And what else do you see as really key to achieving greater impact based on what you've seen and experienced? So not looking for real strategic questions, just want to give you a chance to reflect on that for a moment, and I'll check in with you in a couple minutes. So with your neighbor, just take a minute and introduce yourself if you don't know the person next to you. you doing?
All right, how you doing?
Good. I'm
Rick Bernhardt.
Rick, nice to meet you. All right. I'm going to be making my way off stage here in just a couple minutes, but sorry to interrupt. The good news is there's going to be a lot more chances in the afternoon to continue to learn and connect together, but again, I feel like I put a lot of ideas out there, so apologies if I felt like I was spraying some of you. Just want to make sure I covered some of the things I think the organizer would hope, but there's incredible experiences and insights here. I was just curious, a couple things that may have come to mind that anybody would, be willing to kind of share, put out there. Does some of this add up? Do you recognize yourself in some of this work? Please, if you would mind, and just.
Yeah, so I'm curious, you asked what else, I guess there was a question that almost prompted, like, how do you see this?
Yeah.
With reflecting on it. And I'm really curious about, you didn't talk a ton about the development piece, right? You mentioned some things that tend to on-ramping and wraparounds and stuff like that, and storytelling, obviously, is important in individuals participating in it, but it's like, how do you deal with becoming more individually effective or making that collective more effective on an individual
talent development almost, but almost kind of personal development in the process of collective impact?
Yeah. So I think, like a lot of the groups that I shared with you are groups that have been doing this for some time, that they've continued, just like what you all are, is not building on scratch. You have experiences that you're going to be bringing with it. I think that in terms of that where we've been trying to focus is backbone support groups, is trying to figure out how they can do this with credibility and not take over an initiative. And so there's a lot of development work around how do we provide the convening spaces and provide the types of data and support so that when people show up, they're able to kind of bring their best version. And so I think there's a lot of gaps in that right now. I think how people are using data, again, is a place where there's a lot of development work right now. And I think, a lot of groups, I was impressed with a group from Springfield, Missouri that's doing a lot of work, Springfield, Massachusetts. And so they've been investing a lot of understanding of health equity. And so I think there's the policy and really understanding and be able to talk comfortably about our differences and some of the challenges as it relates to racial and ethnic divisions in our communities that are developmental pieces I think a lot of groups are taking on. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it gets it. I'm also thinking it's like probably a lot of the organizations represented here today, for instance, have like an email newsletter. And so there's two things I think about there, right? One, is that an effective tool for communication? And then how do you improve it? And then two is, all right, you talk about sharing language. Well, how do we all in this room actually start to get better at that process?
Gotcha. Yeah. So it'd be I would say that just like policy and environmental change stuff and how to do that in a way that, like my wife says, can you just speak regular? Can we just talk about, these in plain terms? I think that sometimes new language is helpful, and particularly for groups that need the shorthand. But, I think that we're learning, and you all are learning a new set of language even when you started talking about how to shift the policy, how do we make healthy choice, easy choice, and I think collective impact and how we work together requires some new language. Our team is building a system right now for Colorado that I think will get replicated in other places that's all around people doing food access. So they have a statewide food policy council, and there's a bunch of local food policy groups. And so they will share thousands of data layers. They're going to share their policies, and they'll be able to see that visually, and they'll be able to use their existing email and other kinds of ways of communicating. But that will be their way of sharing TA and stories and examples and seeing how their shared work might raise to the level of statewide investment so that they can start to see where their big goals around increasing access at local levels continue to add up to at a state level. So I think there's going to be more and more use of technology. I'm a relationship person, so I think we need to be very careful around how we use data and technology. Even though our team does a lot of that, I think that's a developmental need that we have is we're so busy. How do we spend enough time with each other? So anyway, good question. I don't mean to, I want to hear from others, sorry. Other kind of insights or ideas that kind of come to mind? Yeah, thanks. There's microphones running around here.
I just had a comment that, and I may have read this recently too, but it does seem like collective impact is a lot more about a mindset than it is about the tasks you're doing. And in some of the experiences that we've had, I think that building the trust, building the communication, meeting together regularly, getting your board of directors on board has brought a lot more success than the actual work which we're doing. But I think it doesn't really start with you're going to collaborate when you meet together, or you're going to start the collaboration, because of a planned meeting. I think it has a lot more to do, as you mentioned, with the relationship people and having that trust on the outset, and that's how you lay a platform for success.
Yeah.
And just a comment.
Thank you. And there's probably a lot of different ways, but I think it's indispensable. There's so many people, we get calls all the time and say, are we right or wrong about this backbone organization? We've been debating this. And of course, we don't try to weigh into that. There's different ways of looking at this work, and I do think the structure is important, but the structure doesn't work if it actually impairs our relationships. San Francisco is a group that we're working with right now, and they would, again, share with you that we focus so much on trying to get our structure right that it started to actually deplete our relationships. What else, please?
That's kind of what we were talking about that it's important to have connections, to build on the relationships with people before we can get into what we're going to do together. John here was talking about, yeah, we're building communities, but lots of times we can't agree on certain goals. And I think there needs to be, for instance, nonviolent communication or different ways of bringing everybody's needs on the table and spending time to build connections with people, hear their stories, go deeper into the connections, so naturally we'll end up finding what those common needs are in a better way, rather than always looking, through our head what we need to do to solve the problem. Maybe building those connections, we should take a little more time in building the relationships. So it's like if it's our family, we'll tend to work together with people, even if we disagree, because they're our family. So when we're trying to build collective impact and build community, we need to spend time creating bonds and build trust. That's
I think that's right. And again, these are my opinions and experiences. They're just that. They've not even shared necessarily always with my team. I think that there's one of the challenges with big collective impact. So it's easier if you're working on a school system. Strive, some of our team have done some work with Strive, and you have closed metrics, you have people that have a vested interest as part of their job, certainly you have foundations and others, and they've done extraordinary work. But it's a little different when you're looking at a much broader open system like a community or region or neighborhood, how you do collective impact. The data is not always there. The relationships aren't always built in like they would be those that are working on school systems. And so what we've been advising and trying to support groups when you're working in a really big environment like San Francisco is pick the Bayview area, pick the Tenderloin, pick some neighborhoods that would allow you to both experiment with how we would do things differently together, how we might do some shared advocacy, how we might combine our eating programs together. Denver's doing the same thing. They're working on just recreation centers, trying to figure out how they would bring different strengths and talents together in their recreation centers, and how to do that in a really shared relationship, and then look at what they might scale for larger healthy use zones in Denver. So I guess my encouragement would be, as you all are moving into collective impact and maybe using even some new ways of collaborating, is how do you pilot some of this and really watch those pilots, what's working, what's not, and how we're working together. So a couple more, please. Oh, right here, we'll just keep going across and over here, since the microphone's here. Go ahead, since you have the mic.
Good morning. Just a question. So with your graph up here, where does the phase of, and I'm going to call it translation, come into? So if I think of childhood obesity and I look at this and say it affects many people, frequent exposure of unhealthy food, and affecting it in a comprehensive way. But if I come into the room and my definition of what an obese child is and your definition of what an obese child is are two different definitions, where in the process is the translation to make sure that we're speaking the same language, so that even if when we have the common or the shared agenda, it's getting to the same results? Yeah,
it's a great question. And again, I think there's a lot of definitional stuff that needs to happen, and I think there's really productive definitional work, and then there's the unproductive definitional work where what does community mean? I mean, we can only have that conversation so many times. I mean, it's a different question than what communities do we want to be serving and focusing on. And so I think one of the things, as people are sharing examples, but also when you start figuring out what metrics you're going to collect, is another way of a little bit of a gut check to say, yeah, we actually do have the same definitions, and in some ways definitions of success. So I've noticed that, the combination of spending that time making sure that we're on the same page, but particularly the process of coming up with shared metrics helps a lot of clarification on that front. Here and then here.
Yeah, and I'm with the school system, so your comment about focusing on the school system kind of resonates with me. Because I think we've actually moved beyond that, and I would actually challenge that to say that working on a school system isn't a collective impact initiative. Saying that we want students to be successful in college and career requires a collective impact initiative, because the school district will never be able to do that alone. Our school district has realized that. One of the examples of collective impact, I think, that our school district is really engaged in and is actually launching or spearheaded, and there's a couple of them that I've had the privilege to work on. One is around a community schools model, which really does require that you bring backbone organizations to address the needs of young people that aren't necessarily academic in nature, but impact their academic success. So that's been a real challenge. And the other right now that I'm personally working on is around getting the community to start looking at equity and access to the internet and to digital devices. And actually, so it kind of speaks to your technology thing. Yeah. We're using that stuff in schools, but we have, about 44% of our students who can't use that at home. So we're really reaching out. We're actually having a summit in a couple of weeks to pull in the businesses, technology partners, and actually ask them to work together to come up with innovative solutions to resolve that problem, because it's not about money. It's really about, equity and educational opportunities. Yeah. The one thing I want to say that I think is hard, because I know folks it seems like it's lofty and it's all about relationships and things like that. And the one thing that I think is the hardest in my experience of kind of being involved in this work is the mutually reinforcing activities. It's different than, and I think collaboration is different in people's minds. Coming to a meeting and all having a shared vision isn't necessarily mutually reinforcing activities. And that's not actually true collaboration. You can come to a meeting and all sit together, but unless you are actually working together on mutually reinforcing activities, I would say it's really not true collaboration. Sometimes, though, it isn't about doing what I do the same way I've always done it. When you have that shared vision and the common goals and those things start to align, sometimes it takes different organizations to actually change the way they do things to make sure that they're aligned with what other people are doing. I think that's the biggest struggle, is getting people to really view what they do. I have to do this differently. Yeah. People aren't going to align with me. We all need to align to that. Yeah. So it's a shift, and I do think that organizations by nature are in survival mode, lots of nonprofits, we're all fighting for the same pot of money, that kind of thing. And it is really hard to look at changing your own organization to shift some of what you do. You may not need 10 organizations that do this one thing. There's a gap in something that's needed. Somebody's got to do it. Yep. Who's going to change what they do to meet that need?
Yeah, I think you put your finger on one of the big opportunities and challenges, a couple of them. One point well taken, I think the school system is certainly not a closed system. I mean, we could look at this in much more mutually reinforcing ways outside of that. So please, I'd love to hear more.
My question is on common measurements, and we have a group that has been working and working towards the same goal, working very well. But what we find is the needs of the individuals sometimes make the measurement for one group different than another. So for example, in behavioral health or in counseling services, somebody needed crisis management where somebody needs long-term, but what we were measuring is in between. Do you find the change in measurement is common? And how do groups have you seen work with developing that common measurement for success?
I think it is hard, and again, I'm going to make this the last comment just because I want to make sure we're continuing to move on our day. And I'd be happy to share some examples of some work that we've been a part of around measurement. I don't think it means that people give up all their measures. I think it's starting to adopt some common measures and a common way of maybe some organizations collecting those. So again, in the example of Colorado comes to mind, there are groups like Food Hubs that are continuing to collect their own resources and data, and the collective is trying to figure out what that everybody's collecting would be useful to the common good, but it does mean that some people are saying we need to align our work to certain measures, which might force the question around, are there too many of us doing this thing, or do we need to change our activities? And that's not an easy conversation to have. It's gone well in a number of places, but I would just say this, we're going to have a lot more time to talk. There's enormous expertise in this room, and I think that the interesting thing about collaboration, I like the definition, there's networking, this type of thing. Collaboration is operating in a way that we're enhancing each other's capacity, and that means we're taking risks, we're building in trust, we're sharing risks and rewards together in some pretty profound ways. So I think that's what we're going to be talking even more about this afternoon, is how do we collaborate using some of these collective impact concepts, because there's a lot at stake here in this community. So thank you for spending some time with me in this short morning break, and I'll pass it to the MC.
Thank you. Let's say thank you to Monte. And he certainly has framed our day for us very well. I would like to now introduce Laurel Creech. Laurel is with Mayor Carl Dean's office, and she's going to speak to us about an important initiative that Dr. Paul actually alluded to a little bit earlier.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm so excited to see all these faces. Many of these faces I recognize and have been involved in creating that culture of wellness for decades. And so it's so thrilling to see you still involved. And then it's, of course, wonderful to see all these new faces, too, that have joined us in this conversation. And for all of you who are dedicating your time, whether it's part of your vocation or you're just volunteering your time to be a part of growing this culture of wellness, thank you. On behalf of the mayor, thank you, thank you. As many of you know, health and wellness is really important to the mayor and something that he is going to continue to make a priority for him for the remainder of his term. And we only have about a year and a half left of that, so we need to push forward and do as much as we possibly can, and then for the next administration, push even harder, because together we need to continue that momentum. So speaking about momentum, I want to invite you guys to a new movement that is actually a continuing movement that the mayor has created called the Walk 100 Miles with the Mayor. Now we're starting a new initiative to continue that work called Walk 100 Miles Nashville. So starting on Tuesday, May 13th, we are launching Walk 100 Miles with Nashville downtown at Fifth Third Plaza. You can come and register and get a free lunch and walk with the mayor downtown. And we are challenging all Nashville residents to walk 100 miles in the summer of 2014. It will end the end of August. But not only are we challenging every individual to walk 100 miles, but we're also challenging walking groups to be created to continue to help everybody walk 100 miles. So if you are an organization, if you are a business, if you have a dog and you like to walk with others with your dog, if you are at a senior home and you want to start a walking group, this is perfect for you. It's very easy. All the information, you can go there right now. It's walk100miles.com. You can also visit it by going to nashvitality.org and learn about how to start your walking group. And we're hoping to have hundreds and hundreds of walking groups that are walking across Nashville this summer. But why are we doing this? Because it's a movement, because we're growing this culture of wellness and we want it to sustain itself. So despite the fact that the challenge will be over the end of August, we're hoping these walking groups will sustain themselves and they will even grow larger. We want this to continue ongoing for years and years to come. So again, thank you all very much for having me here and being able to speak to you all, and for all that you're doing, and thank you for the health department for holding this conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurel. Our next order of business is lunch. So let me give you the plan for that. I stand between you and lunch. I'm sorry. Okay, so the rest of our day we will be in the conference room, and the conference room is behind us. As you exit this room, your lunches will be on the tables, and they are in alphabetical order. So if you'll just pick your lunch up and make your way on into the conference room, and then enjoy your lunch, network, go to lunch with somebody that you don't usually work with or that you don't know, meet somebody new, and because that's what this collective impact is all about. It's all about us knowing each other, networking, and moving forward. So as we do that, have your lunch, network, and then our Nash Vitality Awards will start at noon. So look forward to seeing you then. Thank you.
Well, hello, everyone. I hate to interrupt. For some of you, I probably won't interrupt, but that's okay. Bill Paul again, and now is the time for the Nash Vitality Awards, and this is actually the third time we've given out Nash Vitality Awards. The theme for this conference, collaboration, working together for a healthier Nashville, was chosen for this year's summit because our MAP process, mobilizing for action through planning and partnerships, found that collaboration was really a key priority issue for Nashville. So Nash Vitality Award nominations are based on an individual, group, or organization's contributions to generating or enhancing collaboration or collaboration mechanisms to address advancing health equity and well-being, and advancing equity in health and well-being, maximizing the built environment and natural environment to optimize health, and supporting mental or emotional health. And so this year's awards, we have a Pioneer Award and an Innovator Award, and we are going to start with the Innovator Award with Angie Thompson presenting.
Thank you, Dr. Paul. It is really an honor to be able to present this award today, for it recognizes significant lifetime contributions to service to collaboration as it relates to one of the MAP issues, including health equity, maximizing the built and natural environments to optimize health, and supporting mental or emotional health. The Innovators Award is granted to individuals or organizations to recognize outstanding innovative contributions to the promotion of collaboration. The person or organization considered for the Innovators Award shall have developed or introduced an influential, innovative approach to the promotion of collaboration principles which impact a broad number of people with an identified need. Innovations may be either in the public or the private sector. This year's winner is the Suicide Prevention and African American Faith Communities Coalition. Suicide is a serious public health issue, and faith communities play a unique role in raising awareness of suicide. African American religious institutions have a long history of addressing a variety of adverse life circumstances facing their communities. Ministers have been key players in providing mental health care for African Americans who encounter life problems and challenges, including serious mental illness. Suicide is the third leading cause of death among all youth and is the most preventable if the signs are recognized early. Those who are leaders in the faith community are many times the first ones to be contacted. The Davidson County Suicide Prevention and African American Faith Communities Coalition was formed in 2010 to raise awareness of suicide in African American faith communities and provide faith communities with tools to address suicides of African Americans and to help them stem this devastating yet preventable cause of death. From its inception, this coalition has been championed by both clergy and mental health professionals as a unique and innovative strategy, which recognizes that this suicide prevention work can only be done by a collaborative effort. The vibrant collaboration is truly grassroots, as there has not been a funding source, not one dime, which supports this initiative. It is authentic community collaboration. From a public health perspective, one of the most important outcomes of the collaboration has been that it has been raising awareness of mental illness and suicide prevention. And this has been embraced by the faith community, prioritized, and incorporated into their ongoing ministries. The extensive involvement of other local stakeholders and mental health professionals has increased the capacity of the mental health community to respond to requests for speakers, exhibits, and trainings regarding suicide prevention and mental health topics. The Suicide Prevention and African American Faith Community has developed partnerships with over 14 churches and numerous state and local agencies advancing prevention and public health strategy. This grassroots community collaboration has assisted faith communities in developing suicide prevention belief statements and suicide prevention strategies that are being implemented in their faith communities. The partnership between faith communities and mental health professionals has provided access to information and services, advancing equity in health and well-being, and supporting mental and emotional health. This group has sponsored 4 conferences on suicide prevention in African American faith communities, 3 in Nashville and 1 in Murfreesboro. If you will indulge me, this has been such a powerful collaboration, I would like to read the collaborating members. The AME churches, Cornerstone Church, Elders Chapel United Methodist Church, Faith Church, Faith Life Church, First Baptist Church, Capitol Hill, Greater Bethel Church, Lake Providence Church, Mount Zion, New Generation Church, New Season Church, St. James Missionary Baptist Church, St. Mark Baptist Church, Tabernacle of Glory, Temple Church, Watson Grove Missionary Baptist Church, Webb Grove, Zion Missionary Baptist Church, C&M Counseling Service, NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, Meharry Medical College, Metro Public Health Department, Tennessee Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services, Tennessee Suicide Prevention Network, Nashville Cares, Tennessee Board of Probation and Parole, AmeriGroup, Volunteer State Health Plan of Tennessee, Tennessee Department of Health, Tennessee Department on Children and Youth, Metro Social Services, and Juvenile Courts of Nashville and Davidson County. It is now my pleasure to recognize Reverend George Brooks, pastor of St. James Missionary Baptist Church, to accept on behalf of the coalition.
Where do you want us, up front? Come this way a little bit, please. So now this one's cycle today. Okay, congratulations. And now for the Pioneer Award, we have Julia Landstreet from the Nashville Civic Design Center.
The Pioneer Award is given in recognition of significant lifetime contributions and service to collaboration as it relates to one of the mobilizing for action through planning and partners, or MAP, issues. These issues are health equity, maximize the built and natural environments to optimize health, and support mental or emotional health. The recipient shall be an individual or organization whose lifetime achievements in promoting healthy community collaboration have provided local or regional leadership. In selecting the recipient, primary considerations shall be given to individuals who contributed extensively, directly, or indirectly to healthy community collaboration, promotion of healthy community collaboration to a large number of the local or regional population, and have brought healthy community collaboration to policy, systems, or environmental changes. I am pleased to announce that the 2014 winner of the Nash Vitality Pioneer Award is Janie Day. Ms. Day joined Second Harvest Food Bank of Middle Tennessee as president and CEO in July 1988. As president and CEO, Ms. Day oversees the daily operations of the entire food bank while providing leadership and vision in addressing the issue of hunger in our community. Ms. Day has served on the board of directors of Feeding America, formerly known as America's Second Harvest, the nation's food bank network, and is currently on the board for the Global Food Banking Network, as well as Rooftop and the Nashville Sports Council. Also, she has been appointed to serve on Mayor Dean's Metropolitan Homelessness Commission. She's a graduate of Leadership Nashville, class of 1994, and Leadership Middle Tennessee, class of 2008. She is currently a member of the Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce and the Downtown Nashville Rotary Club. Ms. Day has conducted various workshops for Feeding America's national and regional conferences, as well as for the Center of Nonprofit Management here in Nashville. In 2001, Ms. Day's peers honored her with the prestigious Association of Nonprofit Executives CEO of the Year Award. She is frequently called upon to address hunger and awareness issues and to speak on the topic out in our community. Ms. Day has over 30 years' experience in nonprofit management administration. I'm sure it comes as no surprise that her schedule has kept her from accepting the award in person, but I would like to recognize Kim Molnar, who is here to accept the award in Janie's behalf. Kim Molnar is the Vice President and Program Services for Second Harvest Food Bank of Middle Tennessee.
This way, isn't it? Come on, look at each other. Are we close together? Three.
Okay. Anybody else? Here's some selfies, too.
Can I say something? And if you would all indulge me, I just wanted to say some things Janie would never say because she isn't that kind of person, but I am. She is very honored and humbled to receive this, and I can't imagine anyone who deserves it more than her. I've worked for her for 7 years, and it has been an incredible experience. Her reach in this community is beyond comparison, in my opinion, and she's not here today because she's always on the move, and she's always trying new new things. So from 28 years ago when she started with the emergency food box program to today where we're working on healthcare initiatives where we'll provide healthy food to chronic disease patients to improve their health and change their outcomes. She's spearheading these type of initiatives. She is a joy to work for, and I am so grateful you picked her, so thank you all.
And for those of you who are paying close attention, one of the awards was broken today. So Pastor Brooks will receive the award for the Innovator Award when that is put back in place. We'll get a brand new award to replace the one that was broken. Angie, do you take it from here, or do I? I introduce Rick? Okay, I'm going to introduce Rick. Rick Bernhardt, Director of the Metro Department of Planning, and longtime advocate of healthy built environment, with a real asset to Nashville, and it's been great to work with Rick, but also we're really interested in Nashville Next because we're going through our health planning process as Nashville Next is going on. So, Rick.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, we'll get it here. Well, you just get to see it all the way back. I didn't know it was that far up. Sorry. Yes, you can clap. There you go, Julie. Yeah. I appreciate the opportunity to kind of share with you a little bit about what the status of the Nashville Next project is, and also kind of you're the first group that we're actually sharing some of the futures that will be the next stage in terms of where we're going. But I wanted to start a little bit with some of the background. Some of you may not be aware that we're probably roughly 2 years into a 3-year process, which included a lot of background information, and understand why we're looking at Nashville Next, why we're looking at a plan for this community for the next 25 years. This region will grow by 1 million people over the next 25 years. The core of the region will go from kind of inside the old 265 loop to most of the urbanized area of Davidson County. We're going to have a very different population in 2040, much more diverse ethnic growth, a different population mix than we have had historically. Changing households. If you go back to 1960, roughly 50% of all households had children. By 2040, which is actually, we're pretty close to this number right now, but 80% of the households will be without children. And the largest household type will be one-person households, which reflects the aging demographics, the changing demographics, which is primarily the demographics of the next 25 years are going to be aging boomers and millennials. Those two groups form the largest two segments of the population for the next 25 years. And this has an impact in terms of household size, age, and all simply on housing, how we live, and how we develop. If you look back for the last 25 years, 74% of all the households in this area were what were called prime home buyers. They were people between the ages of 35 and 64. If you look out the next 25 years, that number goes down to 34%. So you have a lot more on the 65 and over, and in the under 35 in terms of starter homes. That's why you see a shift in terms of housing and the opportunity as we go forward to significantly impact and undo some of the negative development decisions that we have had over the last 25 or 30 years. So what's been done so far? We have worked, as Dr. Paul talked about, we've worked in coordination with a number of agencies. This reflects a few of those. But we're working very closely and have from the very beginning with the Health Department and the Civic Design Center and some of the work that's being done in terms of healthy Nashville, and I'll kind of hit on that a little bit later. We started off with a major speaker series. We ultimately had 9 major speakers that we brought in. Almost 2,000 people attended those sessions, which included research and inspirational speakers. We developed 18 background papers. The community developed these background papers. These were experts in the community that put together these background papers. The speakers and background reports are all online. Each of these reports deals with a topic, and the topics focused on, what we challenged them to do was to examine the state of the art internationally of what their topic was, what's the state of the Nashville area, and what are some things that ought to be looked at as part of the plan process as we go forward. We've had significant outreach with a whole number of different tools and techniques, including community briefings, including being at festivals and community events, television and radio, social media, a number of different ways to reach out to the community. And this kind of reflects where we are now. We have gone through all of the research, the community visioning, and we're beginning to make a change from where we have been gathering information to where we're presenting. Beginning in June, we'll be presenting information where the community makes choices as to what choice they wish the future to be of Nashville and Davidson County. Over this time period, over the last year, we've had over 10,000 people engaged in the process. We've received 8,000 vision ideas. That was narrowed down into roughly 34 ideas that we put out to the public to say what is important to you, and again, to form the basis for the plans. And we received a number of items and feedback from that. The top priorities: affordable living. It came out number 1, transit, number 2. I don't know that there's surprises there. Growing economy, walkable neighborhoods, critically important, and strong neighborhoods. Strong neighborhoods meaning places where a variety of people, they have a choice and opportunity to live, and the strength of the neighborhood is in the strength of the people that live there. Those priorities formed the basis for the development of guiding principles, which we also took out to the community. I'm not going to go through these all, but basically these are the guiding principles that are forming the foundation of the plan and will form the development of strategies and then actions that will go forward from where we are. We then transitioned into a growth mapping process, and during this we asked the community to tell us how you wanted the next 100,000 houses, 200,000 people, and 300,000 jobs to be distributed in Davidson County. And we provided them common maps. They were all 8 foot by 8 feet, and we had a bunch of chips that provided people choices. You want single-family suburban style, you want mixed use, you want more centers, a variety of things. And received feedback from 43 maps as we went through this process. We went through each one of those and digitized the information that we had. And so that has led us up to exactly where we are right now. And so this summer, beginning in June, we're going to roll out a series, and I'll kind of go through the process we're going to do, of challenging the community. This is what you said. These are what you said the priorities were. This is what you said that you want the options. So how do you actually want to grow? And what do you prefer and why? And so what we have we're going to be presenting 3 futures that come from that analysis of the maps that are there. And these are really stories about the future, where we've changed infrastructure in some cases, and we're going to explore the consequences of some of the decisions that we go forward with. And I want to kind of give you an explanation of the information we're going to be providing. We have different parts of different data sets, if you will, that we're really combining and providing the information. They include employment for each one of these futures, households and population growth, and transportation. We will be providing some congestion maps in terms of being able to look at the congestion. We're going to be using the base transit systems to kind of compare, and some options there. But the futures that are being presented, there are 3 fundamental futures. This one is business as usual. This is a continuation of the current trends that we have. The second one is one that's focused more on downtown development in Pikes. This was one of them that got a lot of input from the mapping exercises. And the other one deals with centers with infill. If you kind of concentrate the development more in centers and you infill around those centers and infill in those neighborhoods. But they have significant, and it's kind of difficult from where we're at now, but it have significant differences in terms of the distribution. We're going to be providing a lot of other information on that. Again, this one shows the population. I'll just show you on just using business as usual as an example. You can begin to see this is a continuation of the pattern of kind of sprawling development patterns that we have had in this region. Employment, strong employment still continues downtown to the northeast and southeast as well. We also have 3D maps that will be visuals that will help people understand exactly where that growth goes in terms of employment or in terms of population, so that you can again get a sense of the magnitude of that between the different options. We have this information for all three. We are also doing some 3D visualizations. We are taking, for each of the three options, we're taking a downtown location, we're taking a center location, and we're taking a greenfield location, and we're doing some visualization so that people can get a sense of what the three areas and what the differences would be in terms of the three futures that are going on here. Each of these, we also have associated with them goals and policies. The plan itself includes these 7 topics that we have resource teams, which are local experts that are taking the feedback from all of that information that we gathered, are developing goals and policies and actions for the community to understand. They're also evaluating the futures as to how well each one of these approaches does in these areas, and we'll be providing information. Each of the areas we will have these 8 items, which again, the resource teams are viewing so that they'll have an item, and they're going to be doing basically a comparison of how well the outcome or that future is against business as usual or against where we are right now. And we'll be looking at everything from transportation choices, affordability, environmental quality, neighborhood variety, providing opportunities for people to live in choices, fiscal impact on the community, children, youth, and seniors, economic opportunities, equity, and health and wellness. Those are all key things that are affected by the physical form of the community. And so which one of these futures and how well do they impact those areas? And again, we're not going to be presenting numbers, but we'll be presenting information like this does a lot better or a little better, kind of a +1 or a +2 or a -1 or a -2 when you compare that. So part of the information we're going to be seeking is which items are important to you, which of these items are important to you, and then which of the plans do you think actually reflect what is important to you. So we're going to be going out this summer seeking the public's view of these options, looking at where we want to go, what are the options. In June, July, and August, we'll be doing the Pick Our Future. That's our term. Our mantra, our logo is Pick Your Future in any number of ways. And then in October and November, we'll bring back a preferred growth option that is a result of the feedback we get there and begin the process of kind of detailing that out. So the preferred future will look at goals, the resource teams, and now we'll have goals and policies, why this area is important, and associated policies and actions. Again, that will be coming out as a result of the work that's being done this summer. We will also be taking the information, and we're not necessarily assuming that there's going to be like one of them, but there'll be parts of those in terms of trying to pull the preferred future and the preferred goals together and then trying to come up with an alternative. Many of you may have been associated with the community plans process. Our community plans is the process where we actually take the community-wide vision. We did this with Concept 2010, and then we broke it down into 14 communities. We will continue to do that. That'll be part of the process this fall that we go back into. And so this kind of shows the Nashville Next process. The Nashville Next plan itself, which is on the left, will consist of the various elements that you have, and it will lead to updating of all the community plans as well as specific actions and tools and plans there. The community plans lead to the actual zoning and subdivision regulations and capital improvements of the community. So public input is going to be critically important. We have maybe the most important element of our of our planning process is a community engagement team, and they're charged with the responsibility of making sure that all elements of the community are involved and engaged, and they put together an extensive process for public input. We're going to have a series of open houses. This is represents some of the data that they keep. We get zip code information, so we know where we have had a lot of participation, and we know areas where we have not had as much participation. So we're trying to reach out, in particular through open houses, to that area. We're going to have 25 open houses or lounges we're referring to across the county. Each of these are going to be opportunities to come in, look at these options, provide feedback in the form of a survey or information. We also are going to have 4 community events that are focused particularly on hard to reach groups, areas where we have had difficulty. We've got a meetings to go, which is a packet of information. We'll provide you all the information where your local group or book club or library group or whatever can have, provide us feedback. We'll provide a package of information for you in terms of that. If you're on the go, we're going to have opportunities to do texting as well as any other social media. On the web, our web page will also have the opportunity to actually engage in terms of priority setting. In reviewing this, we have developed a fairly straightforward and easy to navigate opportunity to vote that way. We're also going to have some in-depth discussions. We're doing targeted focus groups to make sure that we reach all parts of the community as we go forward. So we are at a critical stage. We've kind of transitioned from the fun visioning, this is what I like, to having to make decisions. I think one of the most interesting comments that we got during the mapping exercise was a woman that came to one of the exercises, and she said, well, her job was to come in and make sure her neighborhood was protected. But after spending an hour and a half working on the map, she's sure glad she doesn't have to make these decisions. Well, it's now time to make the decisions as a community, and we need your feedback and your input. So we hope that you can. There's a flyer I know in your handout today, a little flyer that tells about how to get involved and how to get engaged, and we welcome the opportunity to get you engaged. I also want to mention another activity that the Nashville ULI is doing over the next year. I think they've got 4 sessions, all of these sponsored by, actually developed by the Nashville Civic Design Center based on their work. And the first one is June 20th. And if you just go to nashvilleuli.org, you can sign up, but there's a series on shaping healthy communities. It's building on this same theme. It's another way that we're integrating the work we're doing with the work of the health department, the work of the Civic Design Center, and we're all trying to tie this together. This is really a way to, kind of emphasize this the same way. We're all working together. So go to nashvilleuli.org. And all of the information I've gone through is or will be on nashvillenext.net, and I do appreciate the opportunity to share this with you and challenge you to be available for the actual unveiling in June. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rick. Our next order of business is to take a break. But as we take a break, a couple things to keep in mind here. I'd like for you to clear your tables, and then around the room you see red, blue, yellow. As you come back in 5 minutes, what I'd like you to do is sit in the area that matches the dot that's on your name tag, okay? So clear the tables, and then back in 5 into your areas. Thank you. Christine and Yahweh were our 2 wonderful leaders in that process. So it really is an honor to introduce Christine. She serves as the Co-Chief Innovation Officer in the Office of Innovation for Metro Government, Nashville and Davidson County. And the Office of Innovation focuses on connecting Metro government innovators across sectors to achieve better transparency, efficiency, and constituent focus. Christine's work focuses on issues of poverty, social services, and vulnerable populations. She is currently on public service leave from Belmont University, where she is an associate professor and director of honors leadership studies. Lalonde represented District 18, which includes Belmont and Hillsborough neighborhoods, on the Metropolitan Council. She has served on Metro Social Services Commission and is chair of the Nashville Poverty Council. She holds a PhD from the University of Virginia in United States history. It is my pleasure to introduce Christine Lalonde.
Thank you, Angie. We had a nice reunion today. We have about, I think, half of our Metro Innovation Fellows who gathered for 8 dedicated Fridays this past fall around opportunities and challenges that we shared, and all 4 of those teams had great successes. I want to give a special shout out in particular for the team that successfully had one of the few initiatives that was fully funded that was new in our budget this year, and that grew out of that work. And I mean, Angie Thompson was in that team, and Will Conley, and Jeff Blum, and Kathy Siegenthaler, and I'm sorry? And Karen Grimm. So I don't think everyone's here, but so I wanted to thank that. Can we be brave? Can we be supportive? Can we ask tough questions? Can we say to ourselves, I don't know, or this isn't working, or I need to rethink this completely? Can we say to others, can you show me what you're trying to accomplish? Will you share your data? What's not working for you? I just don't get this. Can you explain? Can we push up against the inertia of the way things are done, the feeling that we are fighting a lonely battle? Can we hold ourselves to account? Can we hold others to account in a way that helps them to grow rather than shrink? Can we create collective space to be brave? Can we create structures that are supportive? Can we adjust our own fears and ego to welcome the tough questions? Can we reward honesty, change, and risk? Can we create new momentum, ways of getting things done, communities to fight the war together? Can we create processes and transparencies and communication that make our own accountability easier to measure? Can we change our culture? Can we change ourselves? So I feel confident that when Angie asked me to speak today, she wasn't expecting a performance of an existential philosopher from the 1950s. I should have a beret on. And I think when Mayor Dean hired me last year, that he wasn't expecting that I would just ask questions. He was expecting that I would come up with answers and get things done, particularly for the vulnerable people in our community who face the tough choices that come with poverty. When we launched our Office of Innovation, we took an unusual step, or the mayor did, that set us apart from other offices of innovation from the beginning. And that was that we had an explicit focus on people facing poverty. That makes us unique. So the question that drives me every day is, how do we bring innovative ideas to this difficult work? Or simply put, really, how do we do better? People ask a lot what happens in the Office of Innovation, and I say, I wanted to call it the Office of Doing Things Better, but it wasn't as catchy. So CC, which is the Continuous Improvement for Collective Impact initiative that I'm really going to focus on speaking about today, grew out of questions and conversation. And those questions and conversation happen in a very particular context and from a very privileged perspective. Frankly, in many ways, I have it easy. I don't face clients every day. I don't have to face the need up close, and I don't have to say no to people in need like many people in this room have to do. I also don't have direct personnel decisions to make. I don't have to tell people that their job might change or that their job might not exist anymore because of the changes we're making. So recently, a social worker that we're working with said that she was, quote, drowning in the direct service requests. And I'm in a privileged position because I'm not drowning in direct service requests. And for me, that privilege means that we have to do work that is harder to do if you're in that other space. We're removed from the onslaught. And so we have to live up to that privilege by thinking creatively, doing the research, asking the questions, and creating structures of support and accountability to help those who are drowning in needs. We ask questions about how Metro is doing, not just individual departments or programs, but Metro as a whole. And we've realized that we need to create multiple approaches to encourage innovation and improvement throughout Metro in a sustainable way. We need to create structures and momentum and conversation. We need to build people, question programs, create synergies, make real connections, and CC is one of the ways that we're doing that. So I'm starting to fall really firmly into the abstract, like almost like spoken word poetry up here. So I'm going to talk a little more concretely about what I mean. CC is not a program in a box. It has some increasingly defined outcomes and things we're trying to do, but how we get to those outcomes is organic and up for ongoing renovation and questioning itself. We're trying to model that flexibility within that framework of outcomes-based thinking that we're encouraging in others. So we're focused on getting things done. The central moment for this work, and really the initiating event, was a request from the deputy mayor and the mayor that we start having a monthly meeting focused on these poverty issues and Metro departments. So we gather about once a month. The mayor, the deputy mayor, and multiple department heads and program leaders come together for substantive conversation focused on a particular area related to poverty. So we have done homelessness and early childhood education and pre-K. We're looking right now on family stability and case management, and we've looked at workforce development. And while that meeting is key, most of the work that matters goes into the meetings ahead of time. So I have a great team. Lee Stewart is here. I want to give a shout out to Lee Stewart, who is an analyst with social services. And Abdelghani Barre and Rebecca Stevens are all assigned to this initiative. And what we do is we say, we're going to focus on homelessness, for example. And instead of just having a meeting about it, we surface all the programs related to homelessness in Metro government. You'd think it'd be obvious, but it's not. Who's doing what where? What are they trying to accomplish? What's going on? And we do a ton of work ahead of those meetings and report out that information before the meetings happen. Nobody presents at CC meetings for any length of time. There's no PowerPoints. There's no kind of song and dance routine. People come, hopefully having done the reading and ready to ask questions. So, but that's not it. It's not a one-shot deal. It's not like, well, now I've presented my homelessness stuff and we're done. We surface issues as we go, and then we start addressing what those priorities are to return to later. So at its most basic level, CC is creating an inventory of all the work that Metro does around poverty. It's huge. I said a minute ago that we're doing family stability work. Family stability and case management, there are programs in, I see Jeff Blum here, there's programs in the sheriff's office, there's programs in the health department, there's programs in social services, there's programs at MAC. There are programs all over. So just even finding and identifying all those programs is part of what we do. But that overview is just the beginning. As we meet with frontline program workers, and we meet with them one-on-one, without a department head, no offense department heads, present for all that. We ask them questions. We also ask them what's bugging them, what they would do different in their own program, or what they think Metro should do differently. If they had a magic wand, what would they use it to change? And I always say you don't get to fly with a magic wand, but programmatically, if you had a magic wand or a magic wand from Metro, What would it be, and what would you do with it? And we collect insights from those conversations, and we seek out patterns. And one of the things that we've really noted is that when you get into a space of honest conversation about needed change, that those needed changes are identified by multiple people. It's not a situation where you have one idea and this person has an idea over there and then that person. You surface, once you start getting into that honest space, you surface very shared problems, issues, and opportunities. And those patterns shape our other work. So in addition to this main meeting we have once a month, we're creating working groups around the problems that we're examining. So for example, we're looking at data systems. I see Laura Hansen here, who's like my data goddess. And we're looking at all of our different data systems. I mean, there's multiple data systems across the board in Metro, as we know. But when we say data systems, we're asking people, really, how are they capturing, not capturing, using, ignoring data? If you use Post-it notes, we want to know that you use Post-it notes. If you use Excel, we want to know that. If it's still paper files, we want to know that. If it's enterprise systems, we want to know that. We don't want you to tell us a story about an expensive system that you're not using. We want you to tell us, really, because sometimes, you know what? Post-it notes work really well. And if that's what you need for the space that you're working in, we need to acknowledge that. So we're looking at how data actually works in the systems that we have, and we're trying to move towards systems that reflect both the reality of how people work and the demands on them day to day, and the new technologies and whiz-bang things that we can now do with the data systems that are out there. So that's one thing we're looking at. We're looking at outcomes, and we're trying to create multiple spaces where outcomes are examined in very concrete and kind of difficult ways of asking questions. So we're trying to create culture change. And that's really difficult, as you all know. Multiple spaces where people can ask and say difficult things. So Angie Thompson's a part of it, and how do we kind of ask each other questions or call each other out or call ourselves out? How can we be tough and vulnerable at the same time? And how can we create supportive space for that? And we're creating that space up the chain where we're advocating, and I'm advocating with my bosses for the space to support risk and to support failure, if that's what we need to, and honesty around all of that so that we can move forward. I could go on with a lot of specific efforts, and I think I might hopefully have a few more minutes I can answer some questions. But I did want to talk a little bit more about that culture piece of creating spaces where we can do that. And we're doing book groups, we're doing small ad hoc committees based on certain issues that we identify, we're doing the larger working groups. A member of one of our teams this week identified the desire to have smaller teams that kind of held each other like accountability groups, to hold each other accountable for their outcomes-based work and giving each other permission to ask difficult questions. To ask, what is the outcome you're looking for? Are you getting there? What's the success look like? What's the data telling you? Call each other out if we have to. Create space to do that for ourselves. So we're doing that in multiple spaces. The culture piece, the way that we think and learn and to all of this, we have to be brave. We have to be tenacious and inquisitive. And we must, like I said earlier, be willing to be both vulnerable and tough. And CC needs to be not just a one-off program that goes away with this mayor or with me or with the Office of Innovation. It has to be a different way that we interact with one another and with our work. And it's a very difficult thing to break out of that. And so we create a separate kind of space that allows us to ask the questions we want to ask, to call ourselves out. That kind of change and movement will not be dependent on a specific program or a specific personality or person. Yeah, I had to digress a minute. I forgot that it was in my bio that I have a PhD in American history, and my work was on the Catholic Church in the 1950s and 60s and the Civil Rights Movement. There's a reason I'm telling you this. So I think about movements a lot. It's kind of what I think about, throughout my career. This needs to be a movement that changes who we are rather than a program. I mean, this sounds very preachy, but it's, when you think about feminist raising groups in the 1960s or the civil rights movement that we have now, I mean, you can, multiple places, it changes how you are in multiple places, not just in the group itself. So when there was consciousness raising groups in the 1960s and people saw the ways in which gender inequity were affecting them day to day, they didn't leave that at the group. They took that all sorts of different places and adjusted the way that they saw the world. That's kind of what we need to do. It's not as dramatic, but in some ways for the people we're trying to serve, it is. And so to be able to say to somebody, I don't understand that data, or I really need you to explain how you're achieving that outcome, we gotta create space where we can say those things. And that is a culture shift. And it's one that has to take root in multiple places and in multiple ways. So, we're about to go into small groups. Thinking about Dorothy Day today, perhaps because I'm thinking about that 1960s stuff, but Dorothy Day, who was the founder of the Catholic Worker Movement, a peace and poverty activist, one time was asked why they founded the Catholic Worker Movement, and she said, we're just trying to make a society where it's easier to be good. So we need to make a metro where it's easier to be good, where when people ask tough questions, they walk away, if not from that meeting space, feeling supported, knowing that there's other people somewhere that they are beholden to for asking that question. When they make a difficult call or admit an error or say this just isn't working or we need to change, that maybe the people that you're directly working with or directly reporting to or directly supervising aren't as supportive as you'd like them to be, but there's a culture overall that will support you in that work. And that's what we're trying to do. And that's what I think is innovation. So we're about to be in small groups, which I didn't know I was going to be proceeding in small groups. So the key indicator for me today is, does somebody say something uncomfortable? Does somebody speak a truth that maybe they wouldn't have before? Does somebody say, well, I don't know if we know that organization will show up to do the work? Did somebody do those things today? That's the key indicators we're looking for. It's hard to measure, but when I get into a space moving forward where people are doing that, that's when we'll know we're successful. So, not encouraging anybody to be rude today, but I am encouraging people to ask themselves and others today real questions about how the collective work that we have is going to happen. And so, and I guess I should give everyone my cell number so that, I'm kidding, but so that you can call me when you're in a space where you feel like you need to be emboldened to be brave. But seriously, be brave, be tenacious, be inquisitive. I have no doubt if we move in that direction that we will have the collective impact that we all seek. So thanks. I have time for questions, I think. Yeah? Okay, I don't want to go over. I could talk about this a long time. Yes, I don't know you, so can you tell me who you are?
Yeah, I'm Art Lee.
Hi, Art.
You can stand up and speak louder.
Now I can get away from that. That was a tough microphone, I have to tell y'all.
Okay, I'm Art Lee, and I guess I'm representing several things. I'm going to represent my community since I'm the president of the neighborhood now.
Okay.
So I'm talking in terms of the president of the neighborhood association. And I want to hear whether or not you get into specific neighborhoods and ask neighborhood people and who those neighborhoods were.
Okay, that's a great question. Sorry. Okay, so back to the, I'm going to talk to Kent Oliver about his microphone and his library room. So Art is the president of a neighborhood association, and he was asking if I've been out to the neighborhood association's talk. And the answer is no, I haven't. Thank you. It's interesting. I'll tell you what we're doing right now with CC. We are very, very focused on how our systems, processes, and culture within metro government are operating. And I think that and one of the reasons we're doing that is because in order for Metro to be the player that it should be, we absolutely should be the model institution for innovation and change and outcomes-based thinking and all of those things. And I can go on and preach why we should be that body. But we can't be if our own house is not in the order that we would like it to be. And so I've done a lot of work over the years with, broader, with nonprofits, et cetera, and kind of feeling like Metro needed to be able to say, here are the ways in which we are taking steps to model the behavior we're asking of others. We are in a better place, I would say, Lee, I'm kind of looking at Lee, than we were just 6 months ago, and being able to say to folks, here's how we're working on this. And we're not, by any means where we need to be, but we've got some momentum. And I was thinking about the ways in which we need to, as part of that work, figure out the ways in which we intersect with those that we're trying to work with to create change and how that looks. And so I'm not giving you probably the answer exactly that you want, but the question for me would be, from my vantage point, would be to the departments and the programs and those places is saying, part of your data must be based upon the experience of those people that you're working with, and in what kind of data do you have that reflects that? Is it focus groups? Is it surveys? Is it active engagement with those communities and the initiatives that you have? Are those people serving? So those would be the things that I would be asking, rather than necessarily directly. I like to hide in my Metro office and only talk to other Metro people. No, I'm kidding. But no, seriously, that would be the questions, that data. How do you serve with the people that you're trying to help or trying to work together with? And if you don't have that, that's a data issue and an outcomes issue. Does that answer your question?
No question, but that's okay.
Okay, sorry. But you're right, we must, you look.
Some of you saying you got to work in the system before the system actually talks to people, that's all.
Oh, no. No, well.
But you're talking like you're dealing with this whole bureaucracy thing that needs to be switched. More sensitive to community issues. I can hear you say that.
Right.
Because if you're not, see, I represent the communities and the poor communities in the
right.
state. And so I'm hearing you say that, but I don't get that last link that you have to get the data from where the community is. So I'm not hearing that. I'm not hearing connection. I'm hearing kind of like the poet.
Right, yeah. Here's an example. Right. Right, no. I guess giving you a concrete example would probably be better. And so let's say that there is a program that is working to create, we're at a Healthy Nashville Summit, so we're working to create more support for children having recreational opportunities, walking to school, et cetera. And if you're, from my position, if part of what you're doing is presenting that as a program that you're doing, it's incumbent on me as a person who's really about building capacity within Metro agencies of saying, where is your interaction with the community that this is taking place in? How is that working? Who's on your teams? What kind of data do you have? Looking at things like, design thinking, which is, kind of it's a hip new set of words, but it's really like, do you go out and look at, so I like walking my kids to school, and the reason why it's very difficult to do that is related to the street structure between me and my school, right? And so if you're not out there really seeing that, or whatever those issues might be, and getting in with the people, and not just serving, but like actually getting. So I think my job and the job of the CC team is to push people to really think through. We've got to move beyond a compliance culture to a continuous improvement culture. So I'll give you examples. When we have federal grants, which a lot of our departments have federal grants, we have to have a public hearing on certain community grants. And when I am told by a program that they had a public hearing, I don't just say check. I say, who was there? How did you get people there? Who participated? And if the answer is, we put it in the typical announcements and we had 7 of the usual suspects there and they're all care providers, that will please the federal government's compliance rules. It does not please me. Okay? So that's where that question thing has to come in, where you say, it is not enough to put an announcement in and invite a bunch of people and say you had a public hearing and now you have public involvement. That is not public involvement. That is checking a box for the federal government, which we must do, but that is not enough. So that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Is that more concrete? Yeah. All right.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Christy.
Okay, I'm done. I'm happy to talk to other people about it too.
Yeah, thank you so much, Christine. That just gives us so much more insight into where we're going as a community at a different level. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce Julie Fitzgerald. Julie is the MAP coordinator for Metro Public Health Department. And as we're going through this next portion of this, if you could hold your questions till the end, there's going to be time for discussion at that point, and we really want to encourage you all to do that. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for coming today and for staying with us as we're moving into the afternoon portion. I'm really excited about this next piece, and I think you will be too, because we're really going to be talking together, working together and collaborating as we finish out the day. I'm Julie Fitzgerald Thacker. I work with the Public Health Department, and I am the coordinator of the Mobilizing for Action Through Planning and Partnerships process. I've been working there for the last 4 years and have a background in collaboration in a way, and also in education. My colleagues and I have been working for the last 1.5 years to gather community members to assess the community's health and then move into community health improvement planning. That is the MAP process in a nutshell. As a health department, our role is to convene and to facilitate, but we are one voice that has been involved in this process, because all of us here today are in some way working to create a healthier Nashville, whether it's we're trying to move health indicators or quality of life. We all in some way are working towards the same purpose. And I'm here today to talk to you about this process, MAP, and its outcomes, and how we can work together to create change in Nashville around 3 critical priority health issues. And I would like to acknowledge all of these people up on the screen who have been integral to the MAP process, whether in its current iteration or in past. So what is MAP? It's many things. It's communities achieving improved health and quality of life by mobilizing partnerships and taking strategic action. That is a huge thing. Mobilizing partnerships, how do we get the community engaged and working together? And then how do we take strategic action, evidence-based strategic action? It's a framework for convening these organizations, and it's a public health assessment tool. It's a community-based and participatory process because we recognize that ensuring the public's health requires collective action. And it's a method to help communities prioritize public health issues, identify resources for addressing them, and take action. And that's what we're moving towards doing, is taking action. So this is one of the key pillars of the MAP process. MAP is recognizing that public health belongs to the community. There's been approximately 2,000 members of the community involved throughout some part of the process. We had hundreds of members of the community involved in visioning. We've had a couple of hundred involved in the MAP assessments, which ranging from participating on the committees, participating on the Healthy Nashville Leadership Council, the MAP core support team from the health department. We had 1,200 responses to our 2 surveys that we sent out, one of which was asking the community about their perceptions of quality of life in Nashville. And we had dozens of members of the community participate in community listening sessions, where we went out to those communities that we, feared wouldn't receive this electronic survey to ask them, how do you see quality of life in Nashville? The health department role, again, is to facilitate, but we don't own this work. This is the community's process, it's the community's assessment, and we're moving into a community health improvement plan. It's all of Nashville's. So, why did we choose MAP? Why are we doing this process? In 2012, when we started working towards looking at going through the next assessment process, we were wrapping up Communities Putting Prevention to Work, which was a preventative initiative aimed at improving access to healthy eating and active living. And that initiative existed in part because in 2002 and 2007, the community assessment said, this is one of our priorities. We need to be looking at obesity. And we were starting to move those needles. We were starting to have some impact in Nashville around that. But we needed to know at that point, are we still doing the right work? Are these still the priorities for this community? We chose to use MAP again because we know that we have to assess the community in a systematic way. For the community to buy into it, for the health department to buy into this is the work that needs to be done, it has to be evidence-based. But we also know that MAP honors the role of the community in this process, and that's something that is really core to what we've done. Community process allows us to create diverse partnerships, focus on systems change, foster community dialogue, and build upon existing community assets. So some other pillars of MAP are systems thinking and using data to drive decision making. The MAP process, and I know we've kind of talked about some of these things today, but it doesn't just look at health behaviors and outcomes, but all of the determinants of health, including relationships and networks, living and working conditions, and economic, environmental, and cultural conditions that contribute to the health of populations. We used valid and reliable sources of health and quality of life data, both qualitative and quantitative. And where we were lacking in some of that qualitative data, as I mentioned, we gathered some through the surveys and community listening sessions. And we involved multiple sectors of the public health system. And I know that it's kind of difficult to see, but I'd like to draw your attention to the graphic in the lower right-hand corner. This is a representation of the local public health system. And basically what it shows is that we're all working in some way to improve the public's health. So you see that there's schools, there's elected officials, there's labs, there's hospitals. Everyone in this room is in some way a part of the local public health system. So there's two main pieces of MAP. It's assessment, the community health assessment process, and it's strategic planning. And you can see that they each result in different outputs. For the community health assessment, we have reports. We are going to have a community health profile. And from the community health improvement planning, that's the strategic planning piece, we're going to create a community health improvement plan. So community health assessment asks, where are we? Each of the MAP assessments starts with overarching questions. These assessments took about 9 months to complete. Many of them were running concurrent to one another. The local public health system assessment asks, how are we providing the 10 essential public health services in Nashville? Who's working together? What's working? What isn't? The forces of change assessment asks, what trends, factors, or events can impact the health and quality of life of our residents? And how can we work towards anticipating and mitigating some of those factors? And that example of the Nashville flood, it had a huge impact on health. And how can we plan for and prepare for some of those other types of events? How do community residents perceive quality of life in Nashville? That's the community themes and strengths assessment. overarching question. And the community health status assessment asks, what is the health status of the community? The assessments provide insight on the gaps between current circumstances and the vision, and they serve as a source of information from which strategic issues, goals, and strategies are developed. So there's a lot of good news happening in Nashville. There's a lot of good work being done, and Nashville's leading the way in a lot of health initiatives. More Nashvillians have access to care. Nashville's unemployment rates are better than the state and average U.S. counties, and the teen birth rate has dropped significantly. Most Nashvillians have access to parks and greenways, and that number is increasing every year. And according to New York Times and Time magazine, at least, we are the IT city, which, puts us on the map and also creates a lot of opportunities for us. Recently, Nashville was given a Bronze Bicycle-Friendly City Award by the League of American Bicyclists, and Cumberland Park in downtown Nashville received top honors as a finalist for the National Urban Open Space Award. But there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. The forces of change assessment emphasized a community and culture under increasing stress, doing more with less, and increasingly disconnected. The stress is affecting everyone, including our children. Many participants in the community themes and strengths listening sessions said that food was more expensive where they live, and there was trouble accessing food. Transportation safety is an issue for pedestrians and for bicyclists. Our chronic disease rates for most diseases are higher than other counties in the state, and there's a lot of poverty in Nashville and a great income divide. From the results of the MAP assessments, MAP leadership, which is the Healthy Nashville Leadership Council that Ted spoke of this morning, and the Health Department's core support team developed strategic issues based on the data from the assessments. They were prioritized by greatest impact and feasibility to address them over the next 5 years. And they all help us to achieve a healthier community. And Dr. Paul mentioned this, and this is the community's vision for a healthier Nashville. A healthy Nashville has a culture of well-being where all people have the opportunity and support to thrive and prosper. In April 2013, hundreds of community members had input into the community's vision. Talk.nashvillenext.net, they allowed us to get community input into the vision through that. We attended different community centers and events around the community, and those responses informed the creation of this vision. And as we're moving into this next part of the day, I want you all to really think about what this vision means and what it would mean to achieve it. And what do we need to do along the way to ensure that this vision is realized? So one issue that was found in the assessments was that the local public health system isn't really functioning as a system. It's not surprising that we don't function as a system. Organizations individually are bound to their boards and to their missions. What Collective Impacts helps us to do is align our missions and visions to support one another to achieve the community's health improvement goals. We saw this as being a lens we wanted to apply to all community health issues and the action to move it forward, not a separate issue to address in isolation. Which brings us to today, a summit of the community coming together to discuss collective impact and how to best move the community health improvement goals into action. So the first strategic issue that was prioritized based on the evidence from the assessments is to advance health equity. As you know, there are many supporting data supporting health equity as a priority health issue. To define health equity, the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, says, health equity is achieved when every person has the opportunity to attain his or her full potential, and no one is disadvantaged from achieving this potential because of social position or other socially determined circumstances. More than any other factor, health status, and Monte pointed to this morning, is determined by social conditions, leaving many populations disadvantaged. Community health status supporting data included poverty rates, income disparities, and the cost burden to renters in Nashville. The community themes and strengths assessment pointed to the need for meaningful employment opportunities as a key issue, and inequality in MDHA communities is a key perception. The Forces of Change assessment reviewed the threats of forces of income inequality and population shifts, including transgenerational poverty and power inequality, and displacement resulting in limited opportunities. There are two goals that I'm really excited to announce that were developed by the Healthy Nashville Leadership Team, Council and Core Support Team to advance health equity in Nashville. They were developed over the course of several months and prioritized. And they are develop better systems to support all individuals to achieve their optimum level of wellness and encourage a strategic focus on communities at greatest risk for health inequities. The second priority issue for the community is supporting emotional and mental health for all of our neighbors. There are many data from the assessments to support mental and emotional health as a priority health issue. The prevalence of abuse, dependence, and/or dependence on drugs and/or alcohol, mental illness, smoking, obesity, diabetes, crime data, and child maltreatment reports were all supporting indicators from the Community Health Status Assessment. Evidence from the Forces of Change assessment supporting the strategic issue included technological dependence, increasing risk, social, functional, resulting in decreased interpersonal interaction, increased mental health issues with threats including suicide, morbidity and mortality, stigma, lack of access to quality mental health services, and limited funding for mental health. And increased stress on children with potential threats being bullying, reduced educational outcomes, and a lifelong impact. Mental health is a risk factor for other health outcomes as well. According to the National Prevention Strategy, a child experiencing mental health issues is more likely to have problems in school and is at greater risk for entering the criminal justice system. And in a given year, less than half of people diagnosed with mental illness receive treatment. And the unmet need for treatment is greatest among underserved groups. There are two mental and emotional health goals to support the priority issue, and they are provide individuals and families with the support necessary to maintain positive mental well-being and promote positive parenting and violence-free homes. And the third priority health issue for the community is maximizing the built and natural environments to optimize health. Again, there are many data from the assessments to support this as a strategic issue. Access to transit stops, bikeways, sidewalks, and parks are all supporting indicators from the community health themes and community health status assessment. Walkability, bikeability, transportation access and infrastructure, and a lack of recreational opportunities were key issues and perceptions from the community themes and strengths. And there were many forces from the Forces of Change assessment that supported this strategic issue. Inadequate transportation infrastructure, the stewardship of natural resources, and population increase, including density and sprawl. These are the two goals to support that strategic issue. Improve and protect the quality of air, land, and water, and increase active transportation options and utilization. So, what can we achieve if we work together? Today we heard many great examples of that, not just in other communities, but in Nashville. We have three huge challenges to address that are being put before you: advancing health equity, supporting mental and emotional health, and improving the built and natural environment. We know that no one group or organization alone can do this for the city, but we can work on this collectively and achieve great things. You're the experts, which is why we asked you to be here today, and we're so grateful that you are. You're doing the work in the community, and we want you to stay here and say, this is how this needs to be done. This is how we need to advance the work to support the goals. in our community, for our community, and working together. I want to emphasize again that the health department doesn't own this. We're the facilitator. The issues are developed by the community, and we have to work together to address them for the community. The next steps, what we're going to do when we move into the breakout groups is to develop strategies. Again, answer the how. We know what the goals are. How do we do it? And after that, the next step is to proceed into the action cycle, which is gathering action teams to actually move the work forward over the course of the next 5 years. And we really hope that you will stay engaged in this process. But another piece is we're going to ask you, who else needs to be involved? Who else needs to be at the table? And that's a part of what the facilitators in this next piece are going to do. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm so excited about the outcomes of this assessment and about the potential to move it forward in this city. Thank you for sharing in this work and adding value to this process. So if you have any questions about MAP, please feel free to reach out to me. There's my information. If you want any of the assessment information, you can access that through healthynashville.org/map. And now we're going to proceed into the breakout groups. So best way to do this, we have, you're already kind of where your dots are. I need to introduce the facilitators if you all don't mind standing up. Thank you to our wonderful facilitators for being here today. We have Carrie, Jason. So they're both working on the mental and emotional health goals. So you're kind of there, and they're going to help you figure out which goal you want to be with and get you to the right place. So it's going to be a couple of minutes of transition. We have Aaron and Tom, who are built-in natural environment, and they're going to help get you where you need to go. And then in the back, we have Lillian and Letitia, and they're going to get you moving into the right place. So we're going to break out into smaller groups by goals. You're going to have a facilitated conversation, and then you're going to do some brainstorming.
I think what we're going to do here is, I heard you all worked really hard, and you seem to be working hard. The facilitator said you cranked a bunch of stuff out. Is that fair enough? You feel like you were pretty productive for a while there? I don't think at this time of day that there's probably the mental bandwidth to have a report out of every detail that each group talked about. But just to kind of get a flavor, maybe just for a few minutes, we thought we might just kind of open this up and, see if there were kind of some big insights. Where was it that your kind of energy was churning, including, is there an idea or two that you were particularly excited about, knowing that, again, these are still ideas that are in the process of being baked. And so I have a little bit of I'll share my mic here, and Julie's going to do the same thing. So don't need to do this systematically? Great. Got to take her.
I just want to say that.
Can I give this to you just so they can hear you? I'm so sorry. My bad.
But anyway, one important thing that came out, I think, is the community involvement in the planning. And what's important here is to work with the community and identify, who are the key stakeholders, who really represents the community, and go beyond what we normally do. We just sit around the table and talk to other agencies that work in the community, but get actual residents from the community and get them involved in the planning from the beginning and the implementation, and listen to them for what their ideas are and their needs.
Yep. Thank you. Others have similar themes in your groups around, as you were starting to talk about who you needed to engage. So really make this community driven. Did you all talk about what that looked like a little bit? Yeah. Terrific. That kind of came up from the theme that you were talking about earlier today, I think, yeah?
Yes, sir.
All right. Other insights. Thank you for that. Thanks for kicking us off.
So for me at the table, our goal, we're working on improving and protecting the quality of the environment. And I think the idea, recognizing that because of recession, because of the flood of 2010, there's a lot of vacant lots, vacant properties in the city. What about prioritizing redeveloping those instead of destroying more natural resources? That's one of the things that came up here.
Yeah. Turn what was really pretty devastating on a bunch of fronts into real asset opportunity. Thank you. Other insights? Julie's getting her physical activity. Thanks for making her run.
Okay, I'll do releve to get the physical activity in. So one of the things we were talking about improving systems and strategies around improving systems, and one of the things that having a methodology for really identifying opportunities, what are the key issues and opportunities, that we talk about systems, but then when we talk about the outcomes we want to affect, it's still very like discrete point, well, we want obesity, or we want food, or we want, but that all exists as a continuum or a system. And so one of the things that we really thought would really be useful for us who are inside, but also in terms of teaching communities, because the issue today isn't going to be the issue tomorrow, but like teaching people about process mapping. If people could actually do good process mapping, then you really could see from the beginning to the end of the process, and then you can more accurately identify leverage points and opportunities, but really taking that strategy of systems thinking to our definitions and presentations of an issue would really help us be more effective about seeing things, and also how if we make a change here, what we need to change here to do something three steps down.
Well, thank you for that. So a sense of helping people see kind of the whole picture and the interrelationships, and use some simple but systematic ways that people can do their work, but to do it in a way that's not linear but really opportunistic. Yes. Yeah, I love it. Thank you. What else? Did this group have any good ideas?
Oh, we wrote them all down.
Oh, you wrote them all down. By the way, we're not losing any of the ones that you wrote down. Any that you would care to verbalize?
Let's put you on the spot.
Well, I think it kind of is just echoing, I mean, we did sort of have our amen moment already in the sense of, all right, so one example is if you don't create the space for community engagement and you just provide a resource, it might go unused, or the expectations for the people providing the resource versus the people expected to use the resource might not be aligned. Whereas if you start from the beginning and have a lot of engagement and a plan for what happens after that engagement begins, then suddenly you actually might have achieved a culture change or behavior change that couldn't have happened if all you did was, say, provide an asset or access to an asset, that kind of thing.
Gotcha. So that's the amen moment, building off our friends over there. How do we build something together that really gets used?
We talked a lot about kind of how child maltreatment is part of a cycle, and how parents tend to parent the way that they were parented. So offering supports for parents as a way to promote positive and nurturing parenting techniques. Some of the ways that we talked about doing that was learning from diverse communities and gathering in diverse neighborhood gathering places to learn about what the challenges are and successes are for parents in those communities. We also talked about how important it is to be able to meet a parent in their home environment to help support their diverse situations that might be going on, and how that can have a better impact on the long-term outcomes for them.
Yeah. Thank you. So really teeing in on this importance of quality of relationship too, and how that interaction takes place. How about over here? Did you? Ina?
Yeah. Hey, we talked about redefining the focusing on wellness rather than illness, and taking away the stigma of mental illness, and realizing that, everybody's on a continuum, and really, when you look at it, our whole society is mentally ill. There's a huge, a huge percentage of people are on medication and stressed, and so why do we stigmatize somebody, because for different, we focus on diagnosis, and so I think we should create, we want to come up with a campaign that what is it, highlights wellness, culture of wellness, and have measure joy and peace, and give activities that focus on creating more belonging sense, defining wellness in specific ways and focusing on that and having a campaign about that. That was one thing we came up with.
Yeah. That's great. What's the country that measures joy and happiness pretty systematically? Bhutan, yeah. The national database. National Happiness Index. Well, there's a group called Samueli, by the way, that's based in DC that's really interested in piloting kind of this notion of holistic wellness and some of these more positive asset, both mapping, that type of thing that you might be interested in checking out at some point, because I think they would learn a lot from Nashville. I'm going to get my physical activity here. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to, in response to that, there are really civic, what is called, civic, I forgot what they call them now, but they want to have good civic discussions that are not hostile. Has anybody ever heard of Harwood Foundation? Because they do a lot of work on that area, and I love what they do. They have one on hope and how to build community hope. But maybe we can get some money and invite him. But I think it's one of the greatest foundations because they believe in civic engagement around polite discussions, how to, diffuse real bad issues. Yeah. So Howard, you've heard of them?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, one of my colleagues works with them. They're terrific. Yeah, around youth engagement. I love that idea, and I think it builds off some of the conversation earlier on. Is how can we, we have it backwards in the United States. I think a lot of times where we are, we're not always tough enough on ideas, and we're hard on each other instead of kind of being rigorous on ideas and gentle with people. And I think you all modeled a lot of that this afternoon, and I think probably in your community a fair amount. Other kind of ideas that want to get out there. I know that you captured a lot on your sheets, but I'm going to turn it over to Julie here in just a moment. Not seeing any other ideas. I just, again, thank you for letting me be a small piece of your day. When I come into Nashville, I get a sense of hope, and I sometimes get a little bit overwhelmed just kind of hearing all the things that are going on in this community. And I don't know if you all get that. Maybe you're closer to it, so it doesn't feel quite as overwhelming. But I think, you all have been living a really great story, and you're starting to write another great story. And I think of great stories, there's something at stake that pulls you into a story. There's something that actually counts. And there's usually a protagonist, and I think in your case, it's you and a bunch of other people outside these rooms acting together with some ambiguity, with some uncertainty, with no guarantees of success. But I think with some courage to figure out how to make this work. And I think there's a lot of reasons to be hopeful. It'll be interesting to see kind of what comes out of the next chapter of your working together. And again, I say that as somebody who's a little bit of an outsider that is kind of cheering you on, because I think that you all represent more than just Nashville in what you're doing with your health and well-being work. And so I hope that you continue to evolve that culture. And Julie, you can maybe tell folks how the next steps look.
So what we're going to do next, we thank you for coming today again and for staying here throughout this process, walking around and seeing how engaged and passionate everyone was with the work that you were doing around the discussions of these goals was really heartening, and we want you to stay engaged. Please make sure that you signed in on your sign-in sheet, because we're going to be calling you out or calling you back to ask you to stay involved in this work as we're moving into the action cycles. So that's really what the next phase is. Stay engaged, stay present, and if you have any questions, please contact me, and we look forward to working with you on these 3 huge issues, these 6, or actually, I'm not doing my math correctly, yes, 6 goals for the community, and just think about what we can achieve in the next 5 years.